all. Welcome to the May 20th meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission, Advisory Commission. If we could, we'll take a quick moment for everyone to do their introductions. Please mention which committee you're on, and if you're the chair, how about telling us when you meet? We'll start down there.
I'm Pierre. I'm on the Bicycle Planning Committee.
Maricel, I think I'm officially bicycle planning now. Am I still on pedestrian? I don't know. Both?
Yeah.
Okay. Bicycle.
I'm Dwight Otwell, and I'm the chair of the Bicycle Planning Committee, and we meet today, which is the third Monday of each month at 5 p.m.
I'm Denzel Washington, and well, she said I was a star, so I'm Robert Parrish, and I am on the Pedestrian Committee.
Excellent. Susan Hatchell, I'm the chair.
I am Rebecca Proudfoot. I am the chair of that outreach committee.
And when do you meet?
We meet the second Thursday of the month
At
6 p.m. in this building.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'm Paul Neville. I'm on the Outreach Committee.
I'm Elizabeth Alley. I'm the chair of the Pedestrian Committee, and we meet at 1 p.m. on the the Thursday prior to this meeting every month.
Okay, we're not on the Pedestrian Committee.
Great. Staff, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Eric Lamb, City Raleigh. Paul Black, City Raleigh.
All right. Well, thank you very much. First thing on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. I did note one quick change. I think it was on page 4. It said Maricel and I attended the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission, and we actually attended a special meeting of the Parks Board staff and leadership. It wasn't their Parks Board meeting. So if you could make that one change, I would appreciate it. Anybody see anything else?
I had a couple items. I think my name got referred to incorrectly. But first, on page 3, the Gorman Street connector, there's a comment that there was additional funding to bring existing equipment into compliance. We had some discussion about the fact that there were some signal height clearances. Were those the ones being referred to here? Okay, then we don't need to add anything to that. I'll take that back. On the page 4, Bicycle Planning Ad Hoc Committee, that was Mr. Otwell and Mr. Black. Different Paul, not me. And finally, on discussion in new business on page 5, the Navajo Drive Sidewalk Project, my name is mentioned. I actually inquired about the proposal right away, and it was confirmed by either Mr. Peoples or Mr. Lamb. I don't recall who confirmed that, but I didn't confirm it. I asked about it. That was all I had.
Okay. Anybody else? Do I hear a motion for approval with the amendments?
I motion to approve.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. The minutes have been approved. It is now the fun time in our evening where we take public comments. This is an opportunity for the public to come forward with any issues or items or questions or concerns they have that are not on the agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes per speaker. And I know we have some people with us this evening because I met them in the audience. So if you'd like to come forward, or is there somebody else who would like to go first? But come on up. We appreciate you coming out this evening.
Paul, can you help him bring that mic down?
My name is Weston Talley, and I'm from Pine Drive, Raleigh, North Carolina.
My name is Eva Kimbrough, and I'm from Pine Drive.
My name is Amy Kimbrough, and I live on Pine Drive in the 5 Points area of Raleigh. And my daughter Eva and her best friend Weston live across from each other. And we're here to bring a little more awareness to some of the traffic issues that we're finding with so much new construction as well as delivery trucks and more speeders in our neighborhood. And just this past week, these two were out bringing a lot more awareness to the community and trying to help slow down the traffic. There's been some recent stop signs added around our area. However, we'd like to see more of them to help with the very big challenge of people speeding and really not looking around. We've actually lost a dog on our street before. We have so many small children that are running around. We should have the ability to have our children in the neighborhoods and feeling safe, and we want this to be noted, that more signs, more opportunities to bring just all awareness to safety of our community and our neighborhood. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and Eva would like to say a comment as well. You can. You can. I don't want to. Okay. Just go ahead. Weston, would you like to say?
Okay. People should stop texting. People should stop texting and driving, because one day you might get yourself in a car crash and you're going to regret it.
People need to slow down around the city and especially in neighborhoods.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Please hold your signs up so we can see them.
Yeah, good job, you guys.
And do you show those out on the street?
Very much so, and we're in the process of hoping that more of our neighborhood community will get other signs to help people be more aware to drive like your children, your pets, your family live in the neighborhood. So hopefully this will get some more awareness and get your attention as well, that it's definitely needed around more of our neighborhoods, and especially in the growing community of Raleigh. And I know we all want to see more economy in the area, but we need to also make sure that we're safe about it.
Great, thank you so much. Do we have other public that wants to follow that? That's going to be a hard act to follow. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, yes. I was just thinking the same thing. That's a hard group to follow. My name is Jennifer Delcourt. As many of you know, I am the Active Routes to School Region 5 coordinator for a statewide project. I cover a 9-county region, and I'm based at Wake County Human Services. And I just wanted to let you all, or share some good news with you all today. Some of you may have already heard. Wake County Human Services applied for the new Safe Routes to School grant from NCDOT, and we found out last week that we were one of 10 awardees for that funding. So Active Routes to School actually comes to an end. The statewide project ends on May 30th of this year, in 2 weeks. And so we're very excited that we received this funding, because it will enable us to continue doing Safe Routes to School work. The other benefit is that rather than working in a 9-county region, I will get to focus exclusively on Wake County and also work in partnership with other grantees like Triangle J Council of Governments. So I really look forward to continuing to work with the City of Raleigh, many of the people at the table, and I look forward to 3 more years of Safe Routes to School improvements. So you'll definitely be seeing more of me at these meetings, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you so much. We do appreciate it. We did have some public comments. Dwight, maybe I'll ask you. There was some emails going around about a safety issue at Morgan Street and Hillsborough Street. The gentleman who contacted us about that. Do you know if that has been handled?
Is this the construction debris? He has been emailing the city management staff, the city manager's office, and I have not been aware of any communications we've had since that last email. So to give everybody background, since we're on the record, we had a citizen call and ask for help getting sediment and construction debris out of Hillsborough Street. I think specifically around the one Glenwood construction project there. Is that Glenwood and Morgan Street?
Morgan yeah.
Street. And going through the policies, it looks like the policies require construction companies to maintain debris clear transportation lanes at all times. And the issue has to do with compliance and regulation. So if you notify the contractor, how long do you give them? You know, what kind of procedures can be taken besides fines? You know, if somebody's not in compliance, what they're doing. And honestly, I haven't been following on the details on that. So.
Okay. All right. I just, like I said, when people contacted us, about something. The other thing was Jonathan Powell had spoken with us last meeting about some intersections, and he sent us a follow-up and listed more of those intersections. So I just want to make sure staff got those, and maybe we can talk about those at a later date. I know we have a busy agenda today, but I do want to make sure we're addressing those. Next on the agenda is staff reports, and we start with you, Mr. Lamb, I suspect, with
Yes,
council
ma'am.
update.
And you'll notice something a little bit different. We actually have a little bit of a breakdown in your agenda packet that has some summary information about the staff reports and committee reports as well. So on the council front, the BPAC's recommendation relative to the Oxford Road sidewalk was approved. And so that project is now moving forward. Council authorized the project to proceed based on the recommendations of the commission. And it was a unanimous council vote. So thank you for spending the time on that you did. On the matter of appointments, the vacant seat that we have on the commission right now for Dan Howe's position is on the city council agenda tomorrow. There was some discussion about reopening the nominations for that seat. There's two current nominees. Neither one received enough votes to be appointed to the commission. So at the last council meeting, they discussed reopening the nominations, and so that should be on the agenda for tomorrow's meeting.
Okay. Just to let everyone know, Dan did say he did not want to be reappointed, and it has been 6 months, and he officially resigned today because he is kind of, he'd hoped to stay until he could be reappointed, someone would be appointed, but he did resign today. So we're all here tonight. So hopefully we'll get a new member soon.
Very good. I'm going to turn over to Fontaine to give you an update on where we are with bike share.
So we have 9 remaining stations that we are waiting permits on. 5 are currently in permitting right now, and as soon as the permit's cleared, we will be moving forward with getting those next 5 stations installed. 2, we are working on some stormwater calcs that we need to do, and then once those are done, we'll be moving those forward into permitting as well. And then 2, we are just finalizing some agreements with private properties, but as soon as those go through, those will be finished, and those are remaining stations that we need permits on. So we are kind of in the final stretch right now of getting all our stations in. You'll see there's been some site work done around many of our stations. That's the team connecting them to the power grid. They are currently working on that last week and this week. And once those are done, the stations will be fully installed. And we actually today reached 10,000 miles with 5,000 rides. So Citrix Cycle, but Weekend is really happy. We're really happy with how the system's being used. Been getting a lot of positive feedback.
Yay. That is good.
Any questions?
The furthest one out is Museum of Art, correct? Is that one on the list of still to be completed?
That's one where it's still in permitting, and the agreement with the museum is in routing.
Okay. And could you explain exactly where that's going to be relative to the museum and the trails?
It is going to be in their main upper parking lot, on the northern side of their parking lot, kind of where the greenway.
Where the Reedy Creek Trail comes through. Okay, good. That's great. Thanks.
All righty.
Thank you. On the community outreach front, Paul, do you talk about the open house?
Yeah, so working with Oaks and Spokes, with Mary in particular, we've been working to try to set up the next round of outreach. We were waiting until after National Bike Month is over, so it's going to be in June. It looks like it'll be June 18th. We're still hammering down the details. We are going to reach out to the businesses along the corridor in particular first and sort of give them a first shot at things, and then have a public open house afterwards. I don't know if we're going to be able to pull it off in the same venue. There's spaces at a premium in downtown, and it's always hard to find places, but I think we've got it nailed down as of today. We just have to confirm everything. Mary, do you have anything to add there from Oaks and Spokes?
It looks like it may be held at, what's that? The trophy, the like bottle shop. Help me out. On Hillsborough
State of
Street.
Beer.
State of Beer. Like putting up a tent so that people can kind of organically. HQ Raleigh didn't have enough space. So everybody likes beer though, right?
Yeah, but we're going to mimic the same format as much as possible that we did with West Street. Again, from the standpoint of the advocates trying to get the cycle track in place, it's been 3 years. From the folks who were on Harrington Street who are just now hearing about this, it's been yesterday. So we really want to make sure that we reach out to everybody if there are concerns, that we're able to try and find ways to mitigate those and work with everybody in the corridor. That's it for that.
Bike month updates, were there anything else?
Just a list of all the completed events that we've had so far this year. We're having a lot of good participation. Thanks to everyone that's been out and been part of our events. I want to especially call out a big thanks to Commissioner Neville for his help with the Capital City Bike Ride once again, with handling all the wayfinding and scouting the route for us the morning of the event. So it was extremely helpful.
And also shout out to Bill for helping with Bike to Work Day.
Bike to Work Day really was a huge success this year. We had more stations than we've ever had before, and then this year for the first time we actually had stations in the afternoon for the on the way home commuters. Okay. So at 4 locations we had in the afternoons. That's the first year that we've done that. So we really appreciate the participation from all of the different station sponsors. We really enjoyed the turnout, and they were very... Red Hat wins the gold star for having the most people and the biggest spread. So they had about a dozen of their employees that were out there, and anytime somebody rode a bike by, they were shouting at them, saying, "Come, we have stuff for you." So,
oh, wow. Excellent.
Lots of good energy that day.
What a great partner.
The month is not over. We still have 3 events upcoming: the City of Raleigh Museum History Ride on May 25th, the Light at the Night Ride on May 29th, and then just outside of the month, but still part of Bike Month, the Cross Triangle Greenway Ride will be June 8th, and that is a ride that's going to start in Durham and end in Raleigh.
Okay, great.
I better ride my bike then.
There you go. Exactly. Eric, I was wondering, what is the status of the request that we made to council about, we went about Western Boulevard, but it ended up becoming more of the thing. Is there any update on that?
No, not at this time.
Okay. I was just wondering if I hadn't asked about it in a while. I was just wondering if we missed anything there. Anything else from staff?
No, ma'am.
All right. Well, thank you much. It is time for committee and members reports. I go first. Yay. I had a very busy month. I missed everybody's committee meetings. I hate that I did that. But since I saw you last, I went to the North Carolina Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations meeting in Charlotte at the end of April, which was really fabulous. And Charlotte is doing a great job with public art and trails and leading pedestrian interval signals. And
Good.
yeah, they're doing really good things. And it was a great meeting. I heard some really good sessions as well. And I believe some of our staff, not maybe all, were there with us, but there were some good sessions about the NCDOT STEP program and about Vision Zero and other things of that nature. I also was at the Citric Cycles launch on May 2nd, which was great fun. Got to ride in the little parade as we went about. I went to a Complete Streets event in Wilson on May 7th, which was really a wonderful opportunity to get together folks from all sorts of different groups, NCDOT and local governments and rural and municipal PO planning organizations, and that was really great. And I've also was contacted about the Greenway Plan, and I have put forward my name and Dwight's name to help with that process when that comes out. I don't know, I think it's later this summer, something like that. I think the proposals are still out. So that's what I've been up to. The next on the agenda is the Bicycle Planning Commission, which usually also includes ad hoc.
So I'm going to have 2 committee reports here. All right, we'll start with the bicycle planning report from 1 month ago, when I was the only committee member and Paul and I sat down and just talked about all kinds of bike stuff. And since we didn't have a quorum, none of it was official, but we solved all the problems. If it had been official, we could have voted on it. We could have all gone home and not worried about it anymore, but we missed out. We did talk officially about trying to streamline and become more specific with our bicycle committee work plan items, and that's something that we concentrated on today. So we had that meeting earlier today, and those meeting minutes will not be prepared for us till next month, but I can tell you that we've developed a list of items that's very similar to last year and focuses on bike share, bike plan, and street sections. For the ad hoc committee, let me see if I can remember. I got notes for that too.
There's actually another thing in the agenda. Again, we knew this would be busy, so we tried to give you some cue sheets if you've.
Okay, great. Let me find my cue sheets.
It's right after the minutes.
Right. I'm just reading it, skimming real quick, make sure that I understand it. Thank you. Yeah, so our last ad hoc committee meeting was earlier this week. Is that right? Yes, earlier this week. We got together and we have formed a set of recommendations to present to the whole commission. We have decided to send a couple of items on to the commission and vote on them at whenever we have a chance to discuss them. Probably not tonight, but we'll see. You don't have any visuals to go with this, do you, Paul? Can we look at those 2 Avenue Street sections?
Can if you'd like.
If you guys have questions, we can bring them up, because there were things that we needed to discuss about this before there's some stuff that we recommended straight up, and then some things that where we saw some issues, we need to bring it before the bigger council. The biggest item before us was the 2-lane avenue sections. And when Paul was going through and doing some design work after we had made our initial set of recommendations, he discovered that there was a need for a section for 2-lane avenues if we were going to capture, if we were going to be able to implement good facilities on some bridges in particular, I think that you were looking at. He developed a set of sections. I think they look good, and we liked the design. So our first recommendation was we like the design of the 2-lane avenue sections with above the curb bicycle facilities and street trees, and we can go over all the visuals, and there's a ton of different visuals for 2-lane street avenue types because there's a bunch of different ways to do it. But we ran into an issue where Elizabeth pointed out that in a lot of these 2-lane avenues, the street type is much more diverse when you look at the mapping across the whole city. So you'll have some very ex-urban kind of roads with no homes on them. This would be no problem to implement this in the future, some kind of 2-lane section, increase the right-of-way and put in above-the-lane bicycle facilities. But Elizabeth was pointing out that downtown, there's a lot of these sections, say like Glasscock is one of the ones that we were looking at, where you could have a corner store and a historic building right next to each other on a block, and a parcel in between could become redeveloped. And if the 2-lane avenue sections were in place, it would cause that owner to put in like a bicycle lane, basically a bicycle path that dead ends in the corner store and the historical building on the other side of it. And so she's concerned about the burden this places not only on the developers, but on the staff and the resulting look of the built environment going forward. If this kind of like the idea with piecemeal UDO conversions is that eventually these will all connect. But downtown, getting close into the core, lots of these properties aren't going to be redeveloped. So we'll get like little piecemeal things without ever any real vision of how it's going to become connected. And meanwhile, these facilities cost more, and they could be difficult to work into the urban fabric. Like, how do you work in a 200-foot bike path that's never going anywhere else? So that was a discussion that we'd like to put before the larger commission, and we can probably need to bring that back at a later date so that we can look at maps and we can look at the sections. I don't think the appropriate time for today. I don't think we'll have enough time to go over that.
Okay, so maybe we'll put that on the agenda for next month, or do you need more time?
We don't need any more time to talk about it. We have the visuals, and we can talk about the map all day long. I just think that today's agenda is pretty packed and probably.
It sounds pretty helpful to have the visuals.
There were some other issues that we decided to move on with, and should we present those now, or should we wait till next meeting when we have them on the minutes? I think these meeting minutes are.
If you're prepared.
I'm prepared to go through these. All right. You know what? If we vote on these today, it's going to be kind of confusing because I've written down the design manual numbers. So I'm going to sit here and say like, hey, on 3.2.1b, we want to, and perhaps this might be something that we can put before the commission, and I can give better visuals at a later time and go along with the minutes, and we can do this next month.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if you could do that and maybe get it out to us in advance so we have sufficient time to make it a quick agenda item with just some, good conversation.
We can present to ourselves.
Yes. So we felt that the ad hoc
First time.
It's fine.
we felt the ad hoc committee had done a good job with the initial charge to look at the street design manual and create recommendations for the UDO sections. There's a few outstanding issues, but we think that these can be properly disposed of in either the pedestrian or the bicycle planning committees. And we had a unanimous recommendation to dissolve the ad hoc committee and bring everything back in front of the full BPAC.
Okay.
What recommendation we can make
I was
wholeheartedly.
going to say, if a committee recommends it be dissolved, I will take your advice. I think that's, does anyone have any concerns or comments about that?
I'll second it.
There you go. Excellent.
And I believe that was it. Yeah, we'll bring these back before the commission next month with graphics and a little bit more detail.
Okay.
So, Ms. Rotwell, if you want to scan your notes and whatnot, we can type those up and have them as part of the next agenda package for everybody.
Excellent.
Yeah, that'd be great. Community Outreach Committee.
All right, we met and we discussed mostly Bike Month activities and events. We also discussed our work plan, which is pretty much, it's ready. The main change is that we removed the speaker series and we're going to go back out and do more outreach in the local CACs because that seemed to be working the last time Paul implemented it. So it seemed like the best way to do outreach.
You ought to get those little children to come with you. They were very compelling.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else? We'll talk about work plans later, but.
If I may, I attend some of the CAC meetings in my neighborhood, and we have members just stand up randomly and say, "What's up with these paint lines?" And I don't understand what's going on with these bicycle symbols. And so they would love to have you guys come and give
I'll
them a
let you go to that one,
Yeah.
Dwight. It's your CAC.
All right, Pedestrian Planning Committee, that is now Elizabeth.
All right, we met last week, Kelly, Robert, and I, to review our work program. And it is largely a carryover from last year with a few small amendments. The first is tabling the branding with the understanding that the city is undergoing a kind of organization-wide branding program. So we'll kind of put a pin in that until that's finished. We don't want to get ahead of them. And then we're going to be, our first item will be delving into more detail than previously into intersection improvements. So audible signals at intersections and design standards for curb ramps and not rocketing folks out into the middle of an intersection, but also balancing the need for guiding markers for getting out into the intersection with trip hazards. So.
Okay, great. All right, we'll come back to work plans later, but that sounds good. Any questions for anybody? We'll move on to old business, which is bicycle planning standards. Travis has come back to talk with us about that.
And actually, Mr. Crane has requested deferral until next month.
Well, there you go. We will table that, and we're just forming next month's agenda as we speak. That's great, because it's a full agenda tonight. New business. We will now move on to that. We've been talking about this one for a while. We're going to have an update on the comprehensive plan update.
Thank you. Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Ira Mabel. I'm with the City Planning Department. So thanks for Travis to giving me his time on the agenda. So this is an update on what we call the Comprehensive Plan Update with a capital U. The Comprehensive Plan gets updated twice a year in small pieces, usually by petition, either from staff for small changes or from the public. But this was a much larger effort undertaken starting in around 2014. So the plan has a policy in the section about its implementation that recommends that it get an update every 5 years. So this is not a wholesale rewrite, but a chance for staff and the public to take a look at the plan overall, and for staff to update things like statistics and reference other planning efforts, which I'm going to talk about, and then for the public to get a little bit of a broader chance to view it. And so this is where we are. Like I said, the plan we're operating under now was adopted in 2009. So this 5-year update started really in earnest in 2014 or so. So it has taken 5 years, not the original intent of the policy. So moving forward, we are going to recommend that this happen more annually for a smaller subset of topics. So for instance, I am forecasting when the Parks Department updates their Parks Master Plan, that might be the year we look at that chapter again. So this might be the last time we come back in this fashion. I know we talked a bit about the agenda being packed, so I'm going to go a little quickly through some of this. But so feel free to ask me questions whenever. So this is just a little bit of an intro about the plan itself. Again, meant to respond to trends and sort of update best practices, take a look at the policies, and see what's been working and what hasn't, and what may need to be tweaked. Quite a lot of public engagement throughout the years. So starting in 2015 with a more generic round of meetings and input about what people thought they might like to see in an update. Again, I'm going to flip through a little quickly. The following year, we much more focused, taking direction from what we had heard before. So here's a list of some of the themes that we focused on. Around this time also, we published what we call the white paper, the Comprehensive Plan Update white paper, which was planning staff really telegraphing the changes that we anticipated making. So calling out particular sections of the plan and what needs to be updated. That was approved by council. So that's sort of our midpoint authorization to proceed with this. 2017, the planning department had a outreach effort called 100 Meetings in 100 Days. So if you include meetings like this and all the CACs we go to, we actually get there pretty much every year, or we're close to it. So this involved a lot of other meetings, but there were a number dedicated solely to the comprehensive plan update. We had 5 meetings on particular themes. So transportation being one of them, along with the other 4 you see here. So these were focused, very well attended from our point of view. I think putting a topic on a meeting much more energizing than a general sort of comprehensive meeting. At this time also, we published a public review version of the draft. So this is a redesigned version. So it is now the blue book that I carry around to these things, rather than the one you're used to looking at. It also had most of all of the edits that the white paper suggested. And this was online and publicized fairly heavily. We got quite a lot of people who reviewed it. And we had also a survey, which was not a general survey, but had questions specific to what we had heard from the input, asking a little bit more detailed questions with diagrams, sort of narrowed down where we were having trouble interpreting or rectifying all the policy suggestions we had heard. This is an example of the plan now. So it is quite big. I feel I don't have to go to the gym on the days I go to committee meetings, carrying this from Fayetteville Street back and forth. So it has been through quite the ringer of public input, as occurs over a 3 or 4 year planning process. And alongside the public outreach, there was the departmental review. This is a coincidence that this is the bike plan on this map, but good for me. So for instance, the transportation section, we worked very heavily with transportation planning. Some sections required much more of a lighter touch because things were generally good. There had been less planning involved. The transportation plan, I'll talk more about, transportation section, had quite a bit of changes, as did the parks section. So that's sort of the process up till now. So like I said before, this is being treated as a comprehensive plan update, so we have a procedure for that, although it feels very different. So this was in front of City Council for their guidance on review, but comprehensive plan updates per UDO are reviewed by Planning Commission for their recommendation, and then are subject to public hearing at City Council. So that process has begun. Council's recommendation, or our recommendation to council, we gave them some options for how to proceed. And it was to divide the plan chapters according to the vision themes of the plan itself as a convenient way to sort of group topics, make it a little bit more digestible. So this is not quite in order, but this is roughly how the chapters were, or this is how the chapters were divided. We have completed, and we'll get to that in a minute. Their other piece of recommendation was for Planning Commission to submit their recommendation when they were done with each of those groupings of chapters, so as to avoid a public hearing at which the whole plan might be open and have a very sort of hard to manage meeting. Give council a bit of a time to sort of review these in pieces as they come. So hopefully we're in a efficient process where people who are interested in a particular topic feel they have the space to come and listen to it in a convenient way. So we've gone through one group of these with Planning Commission. There was not a lot of policy meat in these chapters, so the first line of this table, managing our growth, the introduction framework have no policies in them other than the growth framework map. Implementation is very focused on the plan itself. So not the toughest lift, which is a good thing to get done first. The following section, and these are in order, includes land use, transportation, urban design. That has been discussed once at a Planning Commission meeting, and we'll be back again at their Committee of the Whole meeting this Thursday. Hopefully for their recommendation, we've gotten a lot of comments back from them. And I'm going to talk a bit more about transportation. So this is where I'll say, I have a couple, some sequence of slides about two of the sections of the plan. Bikeability and walkability pops up quite a bit in a bunch of different places. So land use, for instance, has a section about coordinating land use and transportation. Urban design has a subsection about TOD, basically. So, there are a lot of policies. Some are much more specific than others. But transportation, I feel like, and the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space are what I'm going to talk about tonight because they have had the most external planning happening. So there's been quite a lot of planning around transit in the county, and our own Parks Department has done quite a lot of planning. So as two examples of ways we've been updating the plan. But walkability and bikeability pop up in quite a bit of the plan. But those are two I'm going to focus on. So the first public hearing has been scheduled. Again, this is for this first group of four chapters, the introduction through the implementation. That's going to be the 4th of June, so the June evening meeting at council. Planning staff will be hosting office hours before the meeting, as scheduled. We're trying to shoot for the week before that Tuesday, and we always have our office hours right before the evening meeting of council. So we've scheduled those. If anyone is interested to come speak to staff and either can attend the public hearing or would just like the opportunity to ask questions, get more information before those happen. And there is a project page specifically for the update, and I've been updating all of the relevant dates. There is quite a lot of background material here. So we have all of the drafts that have been published so far. There's a sort of track changes version of each chapter if you really care about how every individual word has changed between 2009 and this version. We have that available. And like I said, all of the dates as they change, which they can and will be published here and then through our normal Gov channels of email, Gov delivery, potentially social media, that type of stuff. So that's the process. I'll take a moment here to see if any questions about who we are, why I'm here, what I'm doing. Okay. So this is a lot of slides. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on either of them, but I'm more than happy to stop. This is a version of the slides that as we go to Planning Commission. So each chapter also has a staff report, which is pretty detailed. description of all the changes and why they happened. So I'm going to start with transportation. Like I said, so besides staff coordination, so we really did take this chance to update the comprehensive plan to reflect other plans that have happened, whether City of Raleigh driven or otherwise. So the Wake Transit Plan, Wake County Transit Plan, for instance, in this chapter had quite a lot of ripple effects on the policies and actions in our plan and implementing that. And sort of similarly, the Bike Raleigh update had quite a bit to say also. So two different versions of how we're trying to capture all the other good planning that have happened over the past, since 2009. So this, I'm going to sort of focus on one subsection, which is this number 5. There is a pedestrian and bicycle circulation subsection in the transportation section, although, like I say, bikeability and walkability pop up all sorts of places. Section number 3 about complete streets, for instance, has some stuff in it. The book is pretty big, and each chapter can be pretty long, so there are 91 policies in this particular chapter and 64 actions. That's right, yeah. And I have a spreadsheet that tracks all of them, which is a joy to maintain. So this is a pretty good example of where there wasn't a lot of change in this particular subsection. So the transit, which was number 4, public transportation, has quite a lot that's different, as you might imagine. This section 5, which is bicycle and pedestrian circulation, policies changes really just to improve clarity. So not too much different than we were talking about before. However, the rest of the chapter has some new and exciting stuff. Bike share and other forms of transportation share pop up in some new policies. So in particular, we reference bike share here and in actions. There is a brand new section about emerging technologies that talks about ride share and includes bike share as part of that. And that has other implications like how you have planned for how to use the curb space, and things of that sort. The section about safety has some updates to traffic calming. Again, more for clarification and making sure that we implement everything that we want to do. Example of a new policy about traffic calming. And this is a new
Clarified design speed.
Yeah.
We learned recently, I learned recently that design speed is the minimum, not the maximum. So consider if that was the intent of that statement.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'll defer to my transportation planning colleagues that they're happy with the wording of these things. And so here's a slide of emerging technology. So we're talking about automated cars and ride hailing and bike shares in that one also. And then the actions for this chapter really are in support of the plans that we have in place. So not a whole lot of change. So in addition to the book itself, looks very different, much easier to read. All of the maps also got redesigned and updated with the current version. So here's an example of one where a lot of information was taken away to improve readability, and now we just have the bike plan. And so this is a really brief summation of the outreach that we heard, talking about transit, traffic calming, and autonomous vehicles, rideshare. So we feel pretty strong relation to the changes we're proposing and the public comment that we've heard. I did not go back and catalog every time we've been in front of BPAC. I don't know if that list exists in a comprehensive way, but I know we've been also through rounds of all the various commissions and committees over the years, and have taken your feedback. So this one I'm going to go even quicker. Is an example where the changes are much more specific to a planning effort. So the Parks Department released their system plan in 2014 and their Greenway plan also in 2014. the list of the sections. This one, there's a section about Dix Park, which is now very different than what it used to be. So we'll skip to this. I don't expect you to read this. This is sort of a visual impact sort of slide. The language in this chapter about the greenway system in particular before was much more generic and aspirational, and now really strongly references the other planning efforts. So you'll notice the greenway plan and the design guide pop up much more directly, and some of the other language that is now captured in that plan was removed. So really a focus on that good planning work that had been done. Again, another example of where a lot had been removed because the Greenway Plan does that work for us now. And then some new policies to reference that plan that had not been in the existing plan. So signage and wayfinding, some more carryover, let's say, into the comprehensive plan. This chapter has all the maps are very different. I think there's only one in there that's the same out of the three. And again, taken pretty much directly from the Greenway Master Plan. These are all new actions, so 5 through 14. A lot of the policies were removed from this chapter and replaced with actions, which now say implement this part of the master plan, rather than the policy, which says, do this sort of generically, because the park system plan does that work. So really a much more implementation focus in this chapter than had existed previously. And again, some public outreach. A lot of talk about Dix Park, I think. So I ran through that kind of quick. I didn't anticipate being able to talk about every single policy that mentions the word bicycle, because out of respect for everyone's time. But if there are specific questions about things you've noticed, like I said, this has been out in the world for quite a while, and I know we've been in front of BPAC before. Or any other questions about process, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
I had one question. I saw on your updates of plans, was that comprehensive of all plans that you did integrate? Because I didn't see the downtown plan referenced.
No. So yes, there is a downtown plan. There's a section in the comprehensive plan just about downtown.
Okay.
Those were the primary plans that influenced that particular set of changes.
Mm-hmm. Because that will impact the bike plan.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think downtown has specific policies about bikeability and walkability in downtown specifically. I'd have to look them up, which I can.
I was just wanting to make sure they were informing each other.
It hasn't been adopted yet.
Gotcha.
So they can't incorporate something until it's officially adopted and complete.
That makes sense.
Other questions?
You went by really quick.
Yes.
I just wanted to see if there was, I thought I saw a statement in there in the Greenway section that the Greenway network would be considered part of Raleigh's transportation system or network. If you could just confirm that that's in there, I like that statement and that guidance. Just wanted to make sure.
I'm pretty sure it is, because that was one of the things that I was looking for.
Yeah, that top bullet.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, and there is quite a bit too about travel and there's a active mobility subsection somewhere in urban design, I believe, that don't always use the language of the word pedestrian or bicycle, but talk about either walkable or access to transit, or there's a lot about mixed use and TOD and that type of stuff that will have implications.
Other questions?
Hopefully.
Comments?
I have a general question about the implementation of the comprehensive plan. Now that development is permitted on a by right basis, what is staff's thought on how these will be implemented aside from at the rezoning stage?
That's a good question. So the comprehensive plan is adopted policy for the city. So while, there is a lot of hands being tied, so to speak, following the requirements in the UDO for development that's allowed by right, there is a bit of, interpretation that can be done by staff in terms of what does achieve policy and what doesn't, when there are alternatives for meeting the UDO guidelines. So in theory, every policy in this book is adopted policy by council and should guide staff decisions when possible. So sometimes it's not possible because the UDO is very clear, but when it is, this policy should influence decision-making as much as that particular staff person has discretion to do so.
And then apart from the actual text in the document, I mean, one of the things that's really important to us is the adoption of the maps. So for example, the transportation plan, that does have some significant teeth with respect to exactions for public right-of-way and public infrastructure improvements. Same is true for the Greenway map. When there's a Greenway that's mapped across that creates certain requirements for the developers to either dedicate the easements or reserve area associated with that. So that part has more significant teeth than some of the guiding policy document work.
Right.
But Ira's absolutely correct. There is some opportunity in some cases for interpretation, but it is a much more prescriptive environment now with the UDO.
Right.
And zoning really does control what it is that you can do from a by right standpoint.
Yeah, and the third piece of that also is the urban form map, which has the guidance on frontage as they are applied to rezoning, so that is a rezoning area. But so it's the street plan, the Greenway map, the urban form map, all of those are adopted as part of the comprehensive plan, and that's pretty strong review when we do rezoning cases.
I had a couple questions. When we did our retreat in our planning, some strategic planning exercises, two things that were really important to us were safety and equity. And I guess I'm wondering, how does the comprehensive plan address those two things? And specifically, Eric, in terms of the city thinking about moving toward a Vision Zero plan, would that be something that needs to be addressed in the comprehensive plan? Or I guess I'd love to hear what is said about equity in the comprehensive plan, but also in terms of safety and the possibility of moving forward with Vision Zero. Is this a time where we should be stepping up and doing something in that document, or is that?
Sure. I'll start with I guess equity. So equity is in the vision theme of the plan. In fact, I think one of them has equity in the title. So in 2009, when it was adopted, there was not quite as robust of a discussion about equity as there is now, but it was a guiding principle of the plan, and does influence policy, as we draft it. There has been talk. There was a request specifically for a new subsection that has not yet been, or would theoretically be adopted as part of this process for equity in engagement specifically. So how we engage with the community and making sure that's equitable. And that has sort of, as we've been talking more and more about equity in planning as the past couple of years, has been interest expressed by council to maybe revisit and look specifically at equity more directly throughout the plan. So I think that's a very likely thing to happen once we get through this phase of adopting this update as something we look at moving forward in every annual update, to be less implicit like it is now and much more explicit where we think it can be.
Yeah, and I'm not just talking about planning and policy, I'm talking about implementation and, a broader view of that, particularly with transportation.
Right.
And I think we're getting there, but I guess, I don't know. I did not have a lot of time to review this document. I don't know if others delved into all. How many did you say? 400 pages?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Sure.
a large document.
And then with
So
regards
it's about
to
10
the
pounds.
the Vision Zero item, so yes, this would be an appropriate location to have both a policy relative to the city developing Vision Zero and an action item that would have some type of directive for the city to incorporate Vision Zero.
Right, and it's probably, is it in there now?
It is not.
Okay. So might this be something that we should be talking about in committee of some sort? Or what are we supposed to be doing this evening? Are we taking information? Are we?
It's to inform you of where the city is at in the update process.
Okay.
And if the commission wishes to have any input, again, you can see the timeline that the planning commission is on right now in terms of their review. Ira, I don't know if you have a feel for where they're at relative to finishing up the transportation review.
Right. So these, like every review from Planning Commission, come with a 90-day review period, which is why our aggressive schedule, trying to do this without asking for an extension from council. So transportation, as part of the second grouping, will be discussed at, this Thursday. Probably, don't want to make too much predictions, but there's a good chance that they will be recommendations to council. So that will be some subset of changes that's voted on by the Planning Commission, and we do have a list of them as they sent to us. The public hearing process will follow from that. So, factoring in the break in July, it's a little hard to, would not be before August, I would guess. And that will take as long as, be as unpredictable as any other public hearing process.
But, so we have some time to be talking and.
There's two paths. One is if you want to give any feedback to them tonight as far as any changes to the comp plan, you could provide that input that can plug into the Planning Commission's current review of the transportation chapter. And I'm focusing specifically on transportation. Obviously, as we talked about greenways and such there in other sections. So you could have that to plug it into the Planning Commission's activity and recommendations. Or if you want along a runway, then you're plugging it in through the public hearing process directly to the city council.
But that would be as individuals, not as a commission.
No, the commission could take an
Commission could
action,
do it.
and the chair could represent the commission at the public hearing.
I'm thinking maybe we should be requesting, making sure that Vision Zero is being addressed or at least considered.
I generally agree, but there is a concern in other communities about the equity of the enforcement piece of Vision Zero and whether it incorporates racial bias in policing. So I don't think I would just want to offhandedly say we should pursue Vision Zero. I think an exploration of it would be warranted. And I do feel like that should be communicated to Planning Commission, because otherwise we are a voice of many voices at the public hearing.
And Ira can do that for us.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other?
So I will say, there are we try to have specific guidance, but there are actions in the plan when talking about other planning policies that are more of explore the possibility of doing this plan in the future type of thing. So I think if there is interest, I could maybe provide some examples of other places that has happened in the plan that might.
I mean, if that would enable that item to end up on your work plan and fund it as such, I think, if we were just making a statement that we should pursue Vision Zero, that's one thing. But if we're saying we're actually going to develop a plan and implement said plan, that's different.
Right.
So that was a little bit of my question, aimed at the development community, but I want to ensure that this, is an actionable plan and that it is informing resource allocation and staff allocation, and because I know that the city also has a strategic plan that guides that. Which I don't think says anything about Vision Zero.
I just feel that we've been talking a lot about the crash data and the number of serious injuries and deaths that are occurring in our city, and it seems that this might be an opportunity to make sure that we're looking into, it's in our work plan that we're supposed to be helping to think about Vision Zero as a possibility. So it seems like if this is a document or a process that would work that way, I don't know what the commission would need to do about that, or I don't know who does it, but I just feel like it's an opportunity.
I would suggest that you make a motion, entertain a motion to direct that and to provide that feedback directly to staff to advance it to the Planning Commission.
I agree. Just recognizing the context sensitivity of it and the nuance that we're trying to, the objective is to reduce fatalities and not to increase arrests. But that's, how do we convey that? I think it's the exploration of Vision Zero as a policy for the city.
That sounded like a motion to me. Were you making a motion?
I just did it.
There you go.
All right, very good.
If people feel that is the right verbiage.
So the key stress there is implementation of a policy that would support Vision Zero without saying what it is,
or the exploration of that type of programming, like implementation of that programming, so that through that discussion we could acknowledge.
Yeah, if it's not Vision Zero, it won't break my heart, but I would like to see policy
Of course.
coming forward that starts improving pedestrian
Absolutely.
and bicycle and automobile safety.
Okay. So that's a motion?
Needs to be a
Y'all
second.
get that?
Anyone?
A second.
Okay, discussion? We ready for a vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Is there anything else for Ira before we send him along? Will you be coming back to this group for?
I can, if so requested, yes.
I'm trying to help you get to your 100 quota.
Well,
Yeah. I'm doing all right.
An
Thank
endorsement
you, though.
of the plan.
No, this is just for information.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's FYI.
Yep. And so that second path that Eric mentioned about the public hearing process, I think will remain. Should you have more time and more meetings at this body and wish to do that.
Do any
that's always-
committees want to take up any further research or investigation or?
I mean, it's included as one of our general bullets, right? So that would give any of the subcommittees the agency to look into it,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you much.
You're very welcome.
All right. Next on the agenda is the Barwell Road widening project review.
So we've got 3 capital improvement projects for you this evening. Sean Driscoll from our Engineering Services Department is going to give you an overview of the first, which is Barwell Road. Oops.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, like Eric said, my name is Sean Driscoll. I'm a senior engineer here at the city, roadway design and construction. We have 3 projects here that we're presenting to you in the conceptual design stage. So we'll be looking for any comments and feedbacks you have about the areas. So for this project, the Barwell Road widening project is to widen Barwell Road from Rock Quarry to Berkeley Lake, and more importantly, to realign Pool with Barwell and Rock Quarry to be one intersection that we're used to. This is the project area running from Rock Quarry to Berkeley Lake, and you can see how we're realigning Pearl right here as well. The current conditions, there's an existing 2-lane rural section. There are some improved areas, like in front of the school and in front of the fire station right there, and there is some new developments that do have like sidewalks out front. Really what this project will look like is, if you know how the roadway looks in front of the school, we're pretty much extending that all the way through to Berkeley Lake. So there'll be, two lanes and then the middle turn lane. And we'll talk about what's outside the project as well. So the driving force behind this project is to try to alleviate the wrecks we're seeing on Pearl, as well as to provide some pedestrian infrastructure. We've talked about all this. This is one of the typical sections that we have brought to the public. We've attended 2 Southeast CAC meetings, 1 South CAC meeting, and we have completed 1 public meeting, which we had about 100 participants. It was really successful. Alternative 1, same as 2, which you'll see in the middle, so we'll have our lanes in each direction, this center turn lane, curb and gutter, and then outside, of the curb will have, this alternative will have a sidewalk, preferably on the east side of the road, because there's already a number of sections that have sidewalk on that side of the road, so it's really just filling in the gaps. And then what we're excited about is the multi-use path on the other side of the road. Alternative 2 is similar, but this time we'll have sidewalk and bike lane separated and on both sides of the road. So a little bit larger of a right-of-way here, and probably a more construction cost. We'll have to dig up the existing sidewalk, and property acquisition may be a little more cumbersome, but of those who attended, 86%, those who took the survey, 86% were for the project, 80% liked both alternatives, and 75% liked alternative 1, which was the multi-use path and the sidewalk. So some of the challenges we have for this project is realigning Pearl. All the pedestrian usage right now, all the kids like walking to school, riding their bike to school in that area, or trying to get to the community center. We're trying to make that easier. I know Parks and Rec is trying to get their trail to kind of at least go across Barwell, so that's exciting to connect to our multi-use path right there. And that area is just expanding more and more with all the neighborhoods that are coming up through there. So lots of different subdivisions and apartments. I hope you guys can see this, but this is like a plan view of the project. Toward the left there is Pearl. It's not going to look exactly like this. At least that section of Pearl, we're going to try to make that at least a square intersection as much as we physically can. But the rest of the alignment will follow the existing alignment right now.
Is that a signalized intersection?
Yes. So it is currently now, and when we have Pearl, it will be a true four-way signalized intersection with, designated left turns.
Okay. Is that the only signal?
Right now. So since this isn't 0%, we're still doing traffic capacity analysis and growth analysis, which we're working with Eric and our consultant Seppi right now to make sure we make all the correct decisions at some of those intersections, and whether that be a signal or a roundabout, we'll get through that. And it will be back at 25%, so we may have a few more of those answers then. This is the project schedule. We'll see y'all again at the end of the summer, and then really have a strong plan set by early next year, and hope to construct here in a few years, and it'll take a couple years to build the whole project.
So a couple things to point out, that we've made some changes in our process to where we are now doing pre-design, 0% design meetings and going out to the community. So you're at the doorstep of the project in this case. So, and as Sean pointed out, there's 2 different cross sections that we took to the public under consideration. One of the things that we need feedback from the commission on is which of those 2 cross sections would be more desirable to carry forward with the project.
It sounds like the public was a little bit more in favor of option 1. Did that have to do with impact to their front yards and existing trees?
I'm sure that was in their mind, because alternative 2 does have a larger impact. We heard from actually a decent amount of people that live on Barwell Road, which was great to hear from, because the people that don't live on Barwell Road won't be as impacted as much. They were concerned, but they were also extremely excited about getting these facilities and more urbanizing this area. Okay. When DOT was good with both of these alternatives when we presented to them, but personally I like the multi-use path because it does provide multimodal facilities for anyone. The bike and sidewalk could cause some confusion if you maybe had a disability and got on the wrong one. It's just personal opinion, really, but I'd love to hear what you guys think.
And one important thing, when Sean said urbanizing, one of the things that we are proposing to NCDOT as part of this project is to reduce the posted speed
that's
down to
important.
35 miles per hour. And that would come along with a 25 mile per hour school zone posting as well.
So this is an NCDOT road?
That's correct.
It is. And literally everybody we told that we were trying to reduce the speed limit was for it.
Yeah.
If you're out there long enough, you'll see how fast people drive down Barwell Road. I've heard a lot of people that live on Barwell, people skidding off the road into their yard and stuff. So they're, especially with the school right there, they're excited to hear it's, at least we're trying to lower the speed limit over there and hopefully make it safer for those using the facilities outside the roadway.
Two other things very briefly. One, as part of the Wake Transit Plan, the City of Raleigh has recently implemented transit service out in this area. So establishing the sidewalk system is incredibly important to facilitating that access. And two, by using the 3-lane section, that allows us to be able to go through and install medians for pedestrian crossings and the pedestrian refuges, much like we've done along Buck Jones Road, for example. And those would be coordinated with where those transit stops are located. And then we'll also be adding streetlights.
Excellent.
Would this have commensurate crosswalks and potentially even signals?
So
Those refuges?
as we've done with Buck Jones, it's an iterative process on that. One of the things that I think lends in favor to marked crosswalks out here specifically is the location of the adjacent school and park. And so it is possible that we can look at a location where we are dictating to the community where the crossing needs to be associated with connecting the neighborhoods to the park. And geographically, if you're not familiar with this area, this is out in southeast Raleigh, out beyond New Hope Road. Those of you that have been here for a while may be aware of the previous Old Town plan at the intersection of New Hope and Rock Quarry. We're now seeing some revival of that development plan. It's a very, very large development. So it conceivably will generate a significant number of households that will generate kids traffic to and from the school and park. So we want to facilitate that as best we can. So, but normally with pedestrian signals, we don't normally go with that right out of the box. However, again, special generator may dictate that need to be considered.
Great.
Other questions,
A
comments?
few questions. What's the current posted speed on the facility? Do you know?
Current supposed 45? Yeah, current supposed posted is 45 and through the school I believe is 35.
Okay, and then what around the school type of design considerations are being made preemptively? Like, you talked about the islands and the median. Are there site selections already for those? I know this is at like 0%, so
No,
have y'all
sure.
not designed
That's
that
okay.
yet?
It's a good question. I really don't expect much in front of the school right now to be changed because it has all the improvements we're trying to implement through the rest of the project. The medians that Eric's talking about is where we won't have left turns, where there never will be a left turn in certain areas. So we won't. So there'll be the lanes will be more separated in that capacity. But where the crosswalks will go, that's we'll have to look and determine what makes the most sense and where's the safest area to cross. And there may be a couple locations, but like you said, if it's a larger crossing, we will have that refuge in the middle so that they can make it all the way across.
But you haven't selected the site locations for
ma'am.
those yet? Okay, and then my other question was, why can't we do, what would the right-of-way difference be if you did a multi-use path on both sides of the street versus the 6-foot and the 10-foot? Well, it'd be an extra 4 feet, right? And how does that compare to the 5-foot sidewalk and 6-foot bike facility one?
Yeah, we can look at those.
Yeah, if you could go back to that section, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Because that is a great question.
So both of them say 80-foot right-of-way. Yeah, it's just proposed right now because we're at 0%. Currently, right now, the right-of-way through there is between 60 and 70. It depends on the area. This, what we're looking at right now, is probably about 80, and the multi-use path is probably about 75 or so. So it will increase it probably by about 4 or 5 feet. This is a more expensive project that we're looking at right here.
But alternative one has the multi-use on one side and a sidewalk on the one, and what you're proposing, Mary, is why not just have a multi-use on both?
But you wanted to align that sidewalk with the existing sidewalk facility. Is that why you scoped it to be smaller?
Yeah, that's why we scoped it on that side, and we didn't consider putting multi-use path on both sides because we figured one side is preference for that. So we picked the sidewalk on this side because there's already a bunch of sections that have it. But
the problem is that it's a road that is not going to be easily crossable, potentially, depending on how many signals go in, right? So there could be context reasons why there's a wide one on one or narrow on the other, but I mean, it seems like we're ready to have accommodations on both sides. You have that much, that many new homes going in.
So I think,
schools and parks.
I don't want to get too deep into design decisions and how we're going to get to these, but the fire station's right there in front of the school, and they made it pretty clear to us that they need X amount of distance as a staging area in their driveway. They said right now the nose of their truck pretty much meets the existing sidewalk. So on that side of the road, like if we go with alternative 2, just initially I don't think it's going to work if we're talking about it right now, because they won't have the space.
Couldn't you just neck it down for one parcel?
Right.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, I think we should just explore if we're at 0%. First of all, it's so awesome that you guys, I mean, like I think we're like 99%, maybe like more 95 or something like that. Like we made a lot of progress, and it's really great to see different types of facilities coming before us. So like we would have probably seen like painted bike lanes on something like this before. And this is, I think, much better.
Sure.
But I think like if we're talking about a permanent facility, like how much percentage-wise are we widening the road? And then we should probably, if we're trying to be equal in all of our modes and how we approach our transportation network, be thinking about the same pier facility for all users.
Sure.
So it would just be a conversation about perhaps maybe it's 8 feet instead of 6 feet, but how can we make those facilities so that they're as accommodating as possible to all users?
No, I agree. And that's how I feel the multi-use path is more accommodating for more people. It's a little easier, self-explanatory. You're going to see this cross-section, I believe, in the next couple projects. So it's something to keep in mind on what do we want to see on all these projects, or what do we want to see moving forward. And does it make sense to have this kind of a facility here? Or does the multi-use path make a little more sense? So.
And I like this type of rendering when you can have, I feel like you're missing the trees and like the context sensitivity of what would make a facility like this be a tier 1 premier facility. And so I prefer the multi-use pass here personally, because I feel like it kind of gets closer to the intention of, do you know what I mean? Like it just is like 2 slabs of concrete.
If I understand you correctly, your feedback is a preference for a pair of multi-use paths, one on each side of the road.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I would lean toward.
I can ponytail on that one because of connectivity issues here. Could you go back to the other alternate one?
Sure, hope you guys don't mind me going.
Well, no problem. Right now, from what I understand, is that the side that you propose, the sidewalk is on the east side.
Correct.
That's where the current fire station, school, and community center are.
Correct.
And also where the current subdivisions are expanding.
Correct.
So the other side with the 10-foot is a side that's pretty much undeveloped, but potential of this big development coming in the future. So in terms of where the activity is at this time, it's on the right side of that diagram as opposed to the left. So if we can't have 10-foot on both sides, I think the use would be on the side with the sidewalk right now, the 10-foot use, with the dealing with the fire truck situation at the fire station.
And that's just one situation that we're looking at. You know, the other side of the road, the north side of the road or the west side of the road, initially looks like it's easier to put a multi-use path there. It won't be as infringent as all those
property owners to deal with.
Yeah, that live on Barwell on the east side. A lot of the homes, luckily on that road, are set back quite a bit, but on the west side it is a little farther back. But I mean, I understand what you're saying. A lot of the action is on the east side, but that's why we're looking at safe areas to construct crosswalks that people feel confident to get through.
Mm-hmm.
And the only other issue is Barwell Road connects up further north of this project into Walnut Creek Greenway. And if you're familiar, that's where the Walnut Creek goes across Walnut Creek and does a 270 underneath Barwell. It's quite a construction project. It's very nice. How would you envision tying into that in the future if we have, a multi-use path on one side and a sidewalk on the other?
Sure. So that's north toward Pool.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's not part of this scope. I'll preface that, but I realize we need to see how we're going to connect up in the future.
Yeah, Eric may be able to speak a little better to this, but we called this Barwell Road South, this project from Rockport to Berkeley Lake, and then we're going to have a Barwell Road North, Berkeley Lake to Pool, which we hope to basically take what we're doing here and just continuing it on to Pool on a future project that hasn't been funded yet. But the multi-use path will then tie into the trail over there somehow. What we're focusing on now for this project is with Parks and Rec, they have a trail that's going to try to go right past the community center, Barwell Community Center. And from my understanding, they've, I guess, have the land use figured out all the way up to Barwell Community Center and the school. So they're in the process of trying to figure out how are they going to cross Barwell Road, where do they want to cross at, and how is their trail going to extend through the new subdivision Eric was talking about. So we're kind of focusing on that for now, but long term, we want all the trails to be able to tie into these multi-use paths to create connectivity.
So we were intentional in splitting this up into 2 separate projects because if we try to do the entire thing, the cost was fairly inordinate. Whereas what we realized was if we could go from Rock Quarry to Berkeley Lake, we connected the park and the school to all the neighborhoods that were there at that point.
Yep.
The challenge once we go north of Berkeley Lake and specifically Walnut Creek is we may be facing a bridge replacement or bridge widening at Walnut Creek, and that is a fairly substantial bridge structure there. So that drives up the cost potentially. So we have not figured out at this point, nor have we explored how exactly, once we do the north portion, how we will connect into the Greenway system. But I can guarantee you that once we get to that point, we will.
And you also, in your earlier discussion, pointed out that it might not connect along Barwell Road. You might connect to the Greenway a different way through the subdivision somehow.
Yeah, there's multiple discussions
multiple ways
about
to hit
Greenway
it.
connections with Old Town, and then with the extension of the trail system through the Barwell Road Park out the rear and connecting ultimately into the Neuse River Greenway down there. So
Okay.
there'll be a network out in this area. Which
So
will be
you
healthy.
answered my question. We're looking at it in the future, possibly a Barwell Road North
Correct.
project to tie
Correct.
it in. Okay, thanks.
Yep. And that'll dovetail also, you've previously looked at the widening project for Pool Road. So again, the city's growing out in this area. We're urbanizing these streets and making all of these multimodal connections.
Other comments?
I had a quick question about design speed, and you said it was under consideration to bring the design speed
Yes.
down to 35 miles per hour. Is there will there be a difference in the design on the road?
Not the design speed, the post.
The posted speed, so there will be no design difference?
No, there is. So
There will be a design difference?
exactly.
Okay.
Right. So that's why we're trying to get the speed limit reduction approved sooner than later. We've traded multiple emails with DOT and met with them because they have final say on that. And then once we get to 35, then we'll use a 40-mile-per-hour design speed for the life of the design.
Okay.
I'd love to understand a little bit more about that, if
ahead.
it's okay for me to interrupt for a
Go
second
for
about
it.
this design speed. We keep having this conversation, mostly because I keep bringing it up. You know, we know over 35 that fatalities increase dramatically, so should our design speed not be lower than 40?
So that would just mean making the
Right.
road
I think
a
the
little bit
design
narrow.
speed is based on like what the posted speed limit's going to be.
Sure.
I'll let Mark.
Make that go lower too, if you'd
Yeah,
like.
he knows a lot more about it than I do.
Well, one thing, the design speed is for the vehicular, the traffic on the roadway, and there is a factor of safety that's involved with that. You have a posted speed limit, which is normally your 85th percentile, and then you have a cushion, safety cushion. That's why the design speed, the elements that are geometric elements of the roadway are designed for that speed.
So that means that you could go a maximum of 40 and it be considered safe, is that correct?
Correct.
So if we wanted
Reasonably
cars to
safe.
go slow, what maybe this is in the horizontal curves or something like that, what could we do to ensure that cars are going the speed limit or lower?
Well, you have there's actually 3 things that factor into driving. You have human factors, vehicle factors, and environmental factors. You're not, we're trying to basically address with the design of the roadway, the vehicle, actually the environmental factors. Most of the vehicles now designed can drive roadways much faster than cars did a few years ago. So that's up to the vehicle manufacturers. You'd have to approach them to try to get them to slow their vehicles down, reduce the horsepower with those.
But surely our environment dictates.
To some extent, yes. Yes.
So are there ways that we could if we wanted people to actually go 35, how would we do that?
Police enforcement?
Yes, yeah. Education, enforcement.
Or you're asking about the physical changes to the design in
That's
order, like, because
exactly
some of
right.
my questions were like, turning radiuses at the intersections, like, is there going to be any type of design specification to make it a tighter turn to slow down that speed? Is there going to be any modification to the intersection itself, or are there ways that would you ask, like, that the road meander a little bit in order to slow the traffic down? I mean, we could get our 10-foot, 6-foot, 10-foot, 6-foot and get them, like, do a little slalom and slow them down.
Well, we are using 11-foot lanes here, so we are narrowing the roadway, so that helps with lowering speed. That has a traffic calming effect.
I think that's what you were asking, right? Like the design specifications that engineers would consider in order to slow down a facility.
Well, I mean, we are in the fact that right now it's posted at 45, so the
Right.
design speed is much higher than 45. So we're bringing it down, the design speed, to 40. So the elements of the roadway will be designed to try to curtail speed.
To no more than 40.
She wants
Well, that's
5 more.
I want more than that.
You gave
I
us a
think it's
cookie.
a conversation because I know that we're going to hear multiple
Right.
presentations tonight. And we're talking about bikes and pedestrians and safety, and we have facilities, but I think we also need to think about building facilities that you would be safe on road as well, right? So if you got,
Right,
if
you
you're on a
have to-
bicycle and you got hit by a car on this road, you would likely die. So when we have the opportunity to design a road, it seems incumbent on us to consider ways that we could slow traffic down so that we have a better chance of life.
One of the design elements that we are seeking movement from NCDOT on is an allowance to, one, introduce street trees within the quote clear zone.
Great.
And two is to be able to go down to 10-foot lanes in a 35 mile per hour zone. So at this point, it is a mother may I process with the state, and they have final say. They have not shown willingness to budge on those items yet. We are hopeful that as DOT revisits their complete streets policies, that opportunity will exist.
If this were a city street, would we entertain 10-foot lanes?
And street trees, yes, ma'am.
Fabulous.
So I'm wondering if
Street
there
back.
may be ways to resolve some of your concerns through the pedestrian refuges. If there was maybe ways, you can't integrate the street tree right there because of the design specs for NCDOT, correct? But there might be traffic calming mechanisms that could be used with the island itself in
Right.
order to slow down traffic. So that could be a formal consideration that we propose.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Because I think we really do like this facility. We ain't hating on y'all. You guys did a good job, but we want to make sure that this is going to be a permanent facility once it's in, and then, it's what we got. So we got to make sure it's safe.
0% is a great opportunity to have big conversations.
Yeah.
Other comments?
When do you guys do a count? Like, do you guys know how many pedestrians, how many kids are walking to school out there? Is that part of the process yet or to come?
We got to be in the walk zone.
Pedestrian counts?
Eric,
Do
can
you know that,
speak to
Eric?
that?
I mean, typically, when we've done intersection counts, we capture pedestrian counts as part of the intersection process. But usually, as far as pedestrians along the main line of the road, absent intersections, we don't have any count data.
Well, there really wouldn't be a lot of pedestrians when there's no
No
facility.
I can imagine this school being isolated the way that it is probably very discouraged from having kids walk. I don't know if I'm not aware of any specific prohibitions as there are at other schools, but that could be an issue here.
Okay.
It'd be interesting to look at what their walk zone is for their school.
So maybe our recommendation could be that we'd like you to look at the feasibility of widening that 6-foot sidewalk. Just, is that too generic of a?
No, you mean multi-use path on both sides?
Well, right. And
Or
if
a wider sidewalk.
Or just a wider, like an 8, like look into the feasibility of widening that 6-foot sidewalk.
How much money, I'm sorry to jump on top of you, how much money do you think you would save by maintaining you're going to maintain the original sidewalk with alternate one? Is that or you're just going to replace it in place? How would that look? Or what's your cost savings?
I can't speak to that at this point.
Significant? Or we're talking about like a marginal
I mean, it depends
change?
on I can't speak to that.
How many feet of sidewalk are already in place?
I can't speak to that either. I mean, it's probably 3 sections of a couple 100 feet each.
Okay, that's a guess. Thanks.
But, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
the
I'd like
cost
to-
savings is not humongous.
I
but
also think that it would prevent the neighbors like it when they feel like that this sidewalk is not going to cut down into their yards.
Well, whatever.
I like saving money. Like, I don't know.
This one?
I'd like to see a multi-use path on both sides too, but given the opportunity to take that money and put it somewhere else, or to, you know, make something a lot better than what we have now, using what's there, be more efficient.
And there's also the opportunity to just, there's plenty of spots in the city where we just, and you go out. You don't have to plow down that sidewalk. You can use that existing infrastructure and just add, just look into the, you know, we're at 0%, right? So like, let's look into the feasibility of making a better facility on both sides of the street. And then I guess the other thing for me would be like the pedestrian refuges and how that design feature could be used as a traffic calming. I totally hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree at all. But I think you can probably accomplish both things, right?
Well, it will certainly be a narrower cross-section to not do the 2 runways down each side.
Right.
One thing we discussed when we were looking at street sections in the UDO was the section by the Art Museum, where you do have the 2 runways. Yes. And I think, you know, that's probably a higher volume place. But part of our conversation was where there's a major speed differential between cyclists and pedestrians, or where there's a large number of small children, that might warrant consideration, just because, you know, bikes can go pretty fast, especially if we're linking up to the Greenway. So it might not be right for right here, but just maybe on the northern section, if we anticipate a larger number of longer distance cyclists, separated path is sometimes.
Right. And as we're
2 small children that will run in front of your bike.
Definitely. And as we're looking into starting to create above curb facilities, in order to do this right, we are going to be having to think about how we signage this and, you know, dedicate certain facilities to be for certain modes.
Sure.
So this is a really good first step, but we need to be thinking about how that feeds out, because we are taking away the bike on-road facility when we do this.
Are we good?
Yep, we're good.
Okay.
Thank
Got a
you
quick
so
question.
much.
Go ahead.
Are there transit stops on both sides of the road or just one side?
Say it again.
Are there transit stops on both sides of the road or just one?
Both.
Both. Okay.
At those areas, Eric, the 2 stops?
I mean, there's bi-directional service on Barwell, so there will be stops on both sides of the road.
That's a good question.
And it's pretty much at at Berkeley Lake and right in front of the school.
Okay.
Okay, so just to reiterate, you guys want me to look into multi-use path on both sides, or possibly making the sidewalk larger on alternative 1, and look into traffic calming, specifically at the refuges?
Yes. Sounds right.
Refuge islands. Okay, so I'll try to come back with some answers for you guys on that at the 25.
Great.
And maybe some costs too.
Yeah. Well, we love seeing you so early. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
We will move on to the next topic, which is Carolina Pines project review, and Amy is with us. I would ask someone to maybe, I need a motion to recuse myself and to step aside for a few minutes, and we'll turn over to Ms. Sell to chair this portion, please.
Move to recuse.
Second.
Pulling it up here.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Don't forget to let me back.
Okay.
You need the gavel.
I'll just use the buttons. Thanks, Eric. So I'm Amy Billings in Roadway Design Construction and Engineering Services. And I've done a couple other projects at previous meetings, Yonkers and Tryon Road. And Susan's involved on this project, so I guess she's outside. Oh,
she really does.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to talk about this project. Working with Lochner, the consultant, who's on board with us to work together on this. The current facilities is 2-lane, 2-way with no accommodations for bikes or pedestrians. The project limits are Lake Wheeler Road all the way to South Saunders. This map shows 13 transit stops. I already had a meeting with the transit group, and a lot of those stops are no longer in service, but they're shown on the map, and we are going to work to consolidate the bus stops. Some unique features on the project is Carolina Pines Community Center is really close by. A lot of people walk there from Carolina Pines. And the lake in the middle of the project is considered a dam facility, so we have to be careful about widening the road in that location. And we're also dealing with Norfolk Southern Railroad, who can be a little challenge to work with. The purpose, and sometimes I call it purpose and need because I used to work at the DOT, of the project is to improve mobility and connectivity for pedestrians, bikes, while enhancing safety in the public right-of-way. We are going to reduce the speed limit to 25 miles per hour. Currently it's 35. And we're going to implement traffic calming measures. We're adding pedestrian and bicycle facilities where none exist right now. And we're going to enhance the bus stop amenities to include shelters, benches, and trash cans. And considering several roundabouts in this design and adding street lighting and landscaping. This is thanks to Paul, showing us this different way to show the typical sections. We're looking at two different ones. I couldn't put the green under the trees, but this has the bicycles adjacent to the traffic with bike lanes and the landscaped area, and then the 6-foot sidewalks on both sides. The other alternative has the multi-use path, 10 feet wide, with the green space in between the multi-use path and the vehicle traffic, and the other side having a 6-foot sidewalk, similar to Sean's ideas on his project.
And just one shortcoming of street mix to point out that we're not proposing a 13-foot travel lane. It's actually an 11-foot travel lane. It's not indicating the curb and gutter, so it's not as wide as it would appear to be.
That's why I added these slides as well. Some people are used to looking at these slides instead of the other ones. So when they put the 13 feet, they were using the 11-foot travel lane and the asphalt and, well, I'm not going to get into details like Eric said. But this one with the 2 sidewalks on either side has the bicycles adjacent to traffic, and the other one had it separated with the green space and the multi-use path on one side. The challenge at the railroad is we have to tighten up the footprint because of the signals at the railroad. A better visualization is probably, I believe this is downtown Cary, where they kind of squeeze the sidewalk right behind the back of curb because of those railroad crossings are really expensive to move at all. These are some of our traffic calming features. We're considered the mini roundabouts or traffic circles in the middle of the neighborhood where the side streets are lower traffic, and we have the pedestrian refuge islands around the roundabout and the setback with the crosswalks. Another 2 locations we're considering larger roundabouts is one at Granite Street, closer to South Saunders intersection. We've had a lot of public input on this, and a lot of people living in the area said drivers are confused at this intersection right now. There's no signal. They don't know what to do, and I talked to several property owners right along this area. And we think this would be a great traffic calming feature. And this also has the splitter islands, we call them, which is like your pedestrian refuge islands going around the roundabout. And oh, I should point out there's room in this one for landscaping. The radius is large enough for landscaping. And we put the truck apron there as well, so larger vehicles and emergency vehicles can get through. Another location we're considering a roundabout, and this surprised a lot of people at our meetings, was the Lake Wheeler intersection at Carolina Pines, right where that Grocery Boy Jr. is. It says, no turnaround, do not pull in here, turn around, make a U-turn. And if you're backed up on the highway, on the ramp, and you think, oh, I'll just go right and turn around. Well, no, they really discourage that and make it difficult. And this is a little different than your typical roundabouts. We're considering with the traffic technical memorandum we received, and I think I sent it to Eric and Jason and a few people. They did an analysis of using 2 lanes on one side of the roundabout, and we're considering adding like a buffer in between those 2 lanes to have some separation, whether it be vertical separation, so there's no conflict points with the 2 lane and the 1 lane. And our milestones, we already had our pre-design meeting April 25th. We had our Southwest CAC meeting last Monday, and we plan to have our 25% public meeting in the fall, 65% public meeting in the summer, and right-of-way acquisition and construction in the fall of 2021. And we'll also have a lot more interaction with public outreach with our website. We are getting comments electronically as well as paper. I know our communication person is working really hard to improve our communications with the public. We're also going to increase awareness and education about how to use a roundabout and share the FHWA data that we have about safety of roundabouts with fewer conflict points, drastically lower crash rates and severity of crashes. And this is at the end, and welcome any questions.
So in compare and contrast to the last project, this is a lower volume roadway. Also is a little more local in terms of its function.
City-owned and maintained, too.
And that's the other important thing here. So in that 6-foot strip between the back of curb and the sidewalk or multi-use path, we will have the ability to do landscaping within that section. So a significant difference from what we were just talking about with the Barwell Road project. NCDOT will dictate in terms of what we were able to do with the intersection with Lake Wheeler Road. Lake Wheeler is state maintained, but for the most part, the rest of the project, we're not using any state funds or federal funds, exclusively city funded, city street. So we have a little more flexibility on this one.
Could you go back to the picture where you've got the whole layout with the bus stops?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so notice that I think this is in the package that we saw. The blue line is the preferred bike route, and it splits off of Carolina Pines on, I believe that's Sierra.
Henslow and Sierra. It changes names as you go down.
It becomes Sierra, and it goes by the park, which is clearly shown. Sierra has a light signalized intersection at this point. Mm-hmm. The entrance to Carolina Pines further to the left of that does not, to the park does not have a signalized intersection. What's currently at Carolina Pines Road and Lake Wheeler where the gas station is?
Unsignalized.
It's unsignalized.
Correct.
Which leads
But it does have a left turn lane.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Into the apartment complex, right?
Into Carolina Pines.
Yeah, Carolina.
If you're going south, you can
going
turn
south, left turn to Carolina Pines. Okay. Thank you. I just, and there is no plan to change the signalization through here, correct?
Not at this time.
Still keep it at Sierra.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And our project limits don't extend to Sierra.
Okay. I just wondered if there might be some reason to change the signalization if you have a traffic circle just 500 feet away. It's going to be close.
We think that would create the gaps to have the people enter and exit the traffic circle from Carolina Pines, to have the signals surrounding it.
Okay.
That came up in several meetings about even if you put the traffic circle in, we're never going to be able to get in and out. And we said, well, there are signals surrounding the traffic circle,
okay,
or roundabout.
So actually that would help in entrance and exit from the complexes if the traffic signal is working and if the signalized intersection a few hundred feet away is working, going red and green, and then the traffic circle then would assist people in accessing those locations, right?
Right.
That's the logic, okay.
So looking at this map, it looks like there's a pretty substantial number of single-family homes, predominantly single-family homes along this road.
It is. There's some apartments too, near.
So I wanted to know a little bit more about how this section will work when we cross the many driveways and what the impact is to these properties in terms of acquisition.
Okay, I'm going to go to the other slide. And the right-of-way is less with the multi-use path.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to read those numbers, but the right-of-way is 57.5 with the multi-use path.
Do you have guesstimates on what the current right-of-way is?
I'm thinking it's...
Should be around 60 for the most part.
Oh, great. Okay.
But just one optical issue here, if you go to the next slide. It's an asymmetrical section.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to run the numbers right now, but there would clearly be
More on one side, yeah.
larger right-of-way impact on the right side of the street in that picture.
But we're
considering
acquisition will
that.
be minimal, except for
Correct.
construction easements. Okay.
And then Amy pointed out the two spots that are constrained is one is at the railroad crossing.
Yeah.
And then two is at the
dam.
The dam.
Yeah, well, that's good. So the property impacts are, the acquisition is minimal, the impacts will be.
Correct.
So what are your thoughts on how this section would work when you cross driveways? Would you build ramp-type driveways, or these gravel driveways? How
We
will
match
ensure
existing
safety?
driveways. If they have asphalt driveways, we have asphalt driveways. If we have
Mhm.
concrete, we put in concrete. If there's
Mhm.
soil, gravel, we replace it in kind. But on this section here, where the driveway crosses over the sidewalk, we do put in driveway cuts and driveway aprons.
Right.
And it is concrete to the back of the sidewalk.
Right, so you go back to that picture showing the driveways?
Oh, back up here.
There's so many of them, and I am so excited to get some street trees on a street finally.
This one?
But it does put your walkers and bikers
Some driveway.
right in the
There
path
you
of
go.
the
right here.
car.
Mhm.
Yeah, so.
Combination gravel.
So at these locations, we would actually build a ramp-type driveway apron
Great.
for the residential
So they would have to
properties.
come up and over it.
The sidewalk would be level across the driveway.
Want to make sure that, for these cars that are coming out of driveways, that one thing that happens a lot is, like, the cars just roll right across the path, right? And
Oh, we
so-
have sight distance we look at too with all the driveways.
Sure, but we talk about, like, the behavior of people coming out of their driveways, right, is that they're often, there's not a double stop bar. It's a driveway, right? So it's a residential driveway.
Residential driveway.
So there's want to make sure that we're giving them cues that they need to yield, and whether or not the placement 6 feet back from the curb gives that. Especially, if there's sections where you have so many curb cuts that it's going to be challenging to get street trees in, right, for sight distance and yada yada. If they're very, very close together, there might be cases where it warrants bringing the path even closer to the curb. Just something to think about. I know you're early in design. Like, this section looks awesome, but then you put all the driveway cuts on top, and it's like, ugh. It's a lot of conflicts.
Is there going to be parking allowed along Carolina Pines?
No, and there is not any parking allowed right now either.
Okay. I kind of like the bike lane sections. This is a 25-mile-per-hour road, and it's going to have lots of, it looks like displacements going on. That it looks like there'll be roundabouts and lots of other, like, natural traffic calming. So what's the AADT projected to be on this road? Do we know?
It's currently around
Yeah, I
3,000.
have the,
That's within our
I didn't
specs
bring the
for, like, an
traffic
on-road
study with
bicycle
me.
facility. Like, I complain all the time, like, get these bicycle facilities off the road, and
But this one, it might be safer to ride in the road.
this one, it might be, like, better to put bikes in the road and keep them off the driveways and.
Well, that's
I
kind
think we
of,
always had that option, right?
Right.
right. I mean, I'm kind of
3,300 ADT on Carolina Pines.
Okay.
of that same mentality, Dwight, with this specific application. And I feel kind of like weird saying it. But I want to think about, like, the context sensitivity of each of these applications and seeing all these driveways hitting. If we're going to be putting a mixed-use path on one side of the road, and it's not going to be indicating that it is a bicycle facility and it's just a mixed-use path, I don't know if the bikes are not going to know where they're supposed to be, I guess. And then are they going to organically want to use the road in this type of facility? But if we do include, oh yes, please.
And kind of address that. If we're putting in a mixed-use path, it'll be an asphalt path. So you'll have that material, and actually you'll be giving you the drivers leaving their driveway, it'll give them a visual cue because there'll be a difference in surface treatment. You'll have most of those look like they're concrete or gravel, so you will have an asphalt multi-use path going across their driveway. So you're giving priority to the bicyclist.
To go off on a completely different
and this-
tangent.
Pardon?
A year or two ago, we recommended installing concrete for a multi-use path. Was that along Capitol? Do you remember that one, Eric? Because the city has the ability to maintain concrete sidewalks and does not have crew and equipment to maintain asphalt facilities. Is that still the case?
Not entirely, no.
Do
We
you guys remember that
maintain-
vote that we did?
It
Paul?
was a conversation about durability.
Okay.
The trade-off is that you have the joints, so as you're riding your bicycle down that, it doesn't readily communicate as much that it's a bicycle facility, and it certainly doesn't ride as smooth, but it lasts a lot longer and is stronger material, more resistant to tree roots and whatnot. New Bern Avenue was the one I believe we had that conversation on.
Sounds right.
Yeah, but asphalt is generally what we have done, again, from a multi-use path standpoint.
Okay.
Yeah, and it can be addressed with pavement markings. Again, that would be something to take up with the design team. And so
Well,
you can
right.
put down, a yellow stripe, or you can put
Right.
down some things on the concrete as
Right.
well.
At each driveway, you could put a white line across.
Well, that's kind of what, I guess, like, I have this image in my head of like the Netherlands, right? And they have their off-road facilities, but they look like a bicycle facility. They have, bidirectional, like a cycle track, like, and they have markings to explicitly indicate that it is a bicycle facility. And if we're starting to, of course, a pedestrian could walk on that, but I think if we're doing a facility like that, we have to be thinking about that directional cue to someone. And I did have a few questions too. Did y'all ask the neighborhood yet, out of curiosity? Were they leaning toward a certain type of alignment at all? Or?
The data we received so far is there are not many transit riders who submitted data. More than 3/4 preferred the roundabout at Lake Wheeler over the traffic signal. More than 90% preferred the multi-use path over
Okay.
the 2 sidewalks.
Okay.
And more than 65% did desire the mini roundabouts for traffic calming features. So
Okay.
in all the conversations, some people didn't submit
Right.
hard copies of their thoughts, but when we had the pre-design public meeting, I would say really strong support for
the
traffic
multi-use
calming,
path,
multi-use
too.
path, and the roundabouts.
It's
Right.
got a narrower right away too.
Right, yeah. And
That was another
so
comment.
I would be curious about how the roundabout then interacts with that facility too, as far as the multi-use path, how it's circumventing that and coming around on both sides. Would it just kind of follow a sidewalk type alignment then?
No, I think it's, I had some data, I didn't bring it to this meeting, I'll probably bring it to the next one. I have a lot of literature about the roundabouts and using it with bike and ped facilities, and it's sort of like wider, and experienced drivers, I can't remember if I shared it with Paul, can go on sort of like a mini ramp on and off the multi-use
Right.
path
Yes.
at the roundabouts.
Right, yeah, so I would like us as a commission, but as staff as well, to be looking at some different applications for roundabouts and how they could better integrate pedestrian and bicycle facilities, and it sounds like you're kind of preemptively doing that. But to date, like for instance, our Hillsborough design facility is not, to me, like when I'm with my children, that's not a comfortable facility for me because I have to go in and out and in and out of traffic, and I prefer to be able to not do that. So I don't think that's the best standard that we have right now for a roundabout. So I would like us to explore a different standard for that going forward that integrates all modes a little bit more cohesively. And it sounds like you're already exploring some of those options, but I would like to really look at that roundabout itself and making sure. And I also think there might be some unique opportunities for stormwater management in the, I was on a webinar with them.
We are incorporating the GSI details, and we've
Okay.
shared it with the consultant and the person doing the stormwater design.
Okay.
And that is in their scope of work to
Okay.
use BMPs where applicable at
Great.
the best sites.
Okay. They're checking the boxes for me, y'all.
And I talked to Stormwater Wayne
Okay.
about all this.
Great.
And Wayne also presented at our Southwest CAC meeting about all the stormwater
Okay.
topics.
So are we ready to move forward with a recommendation for the mixed-use path facility after hearing some of that input? Or what do y'all
Are
think?
we being asked for a
Or, yeah, what's
recommendation?
going on?
Yes, we're being asked for a recommendation.
That's alternative 2, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Any additional recommendations on top of that, or just recommend alternative 2?
The study about the safety and visibility at driveway cuts.
Is there any way that the bicycle committee could look at the roundabout design specifically with staff in order to really understand any interventions or best practices that could take place, just as like a side discussion on those roundabouts specifically.
Let me suggest this. So let us bring you back something to the commission as these projects evolve and we
Okay.
start to take these types of advanced designs
Mm-hmm.
and bicycle integration into the consideration. Let's bring that back and give you something to react to and
Okay.
get some more feedback from you at that point.
Sure.
That would be all right.
I'm comfortable with that.
And I just want to reiterate what Sean said, we're at the conceptual stage. Because as we move forward with the design, there's a lot of time and energy and expense involved with generating cross-sections and
Right.
right-of-way real estate impacts. And we don't want to get too far down the path.
Right.
If we don't incorporate what the
Of course.
citizens want.
Right.
And-
Which was why I wasn't sure if it would make sense to preemptively discuss those things
I think
before they
part
got to
of
a
that,
design.
Again, it's also going to depend upon what the recommendation of the commission is regarding cross-sections, because in the context of alternate 2, you're going to have fairly asymmetrical but fairly uniform behind the curb locations. If we're going with alternative 1 and we have the bike lanes,
Right.
then as Amy was talking about, ramping up, getting those off and pushing those around the outside of the roundabout
Right.
would be what we have to consider.
But that also, yeah. And so would it be an asymmetrical cross-section as far as the tree plantings too, if we did or would we have the same amount of
It's just
green
more its
space?
impact on the right-of-way, right?
For
So
the-
when you're
it
on it,
bites
you
in.
won't feel it necessarily. I mean, maybe a little bit.
Right.
But it's more about like how the impacts to properties could
Right.
be more on one side than another.
But no, the landscape buffer is identical in both options.
Right.
And I just want to point out, even though we have reduced right-of-way, all projects have easements, whether it be permanent slope easement or electric utility easement. And I just want to make that point that there's sometimes drainage easements, water line easements. So in an ideal world, and everything's perfect, and the contours and geometry matches, you don't need much easement. But if you cause a wider footprint, there is going to be cut and fill associated with that, and there will be slope easements.
If this was the Midwest, it would be easy.
That's right. Everything's flat and
Question.
square.
I apologize, jumping back in on the questions. I noticed that you have on the section with the bike lanes, which I don't think we're going to go with anyway, so maybe I'm just wasting everybody's time. You had 13-foot lanes stated for the sections with the MUP versus 11-foot lanes with the bike lanes.
That's what I said was an artifact
curb and gutter.
of street mix, doesn't.
I'm sorry.
That
Yeah.
doesn't.
I'm getting into 3 hours of talking bikes here now, so I'm getting.
Typically, we use these, but we thought you might be more familiar
Sorry.
with street mix, but
Yeah, we didn't have a chance to edit the 13.
No, he told us, and I just completely forgot. So.
right.
Are there any strong feelings about any of these alignments?
I think they're both good options.
That's kind of how I feel, yeah.
Hey, you got
But
it?
the community said that they did like the multi-use path, so given that, I feel like they're both safe facilities.
I think that
The
I would be
multi-use path
comfortable.
got a 93%
Yeah, like-
support.
Well, there you go.
I'd like to support the community on this one, and I think that this is a good facility. I would move that we support alternate 2.
I hear a second?
Second.
Oh, do you want me to?
I was
come
just
in?
mentioning the sidewalk
Oh.
cuts.
Sure.
Investigate that.
I was under the impression that you guys were doing that already, and that was part of the plan, if you were going to look at the sidewalk cuts
Sidewalk
and
cuts and the roundabout design.
the roundabout design, but we can add that in there. So I would like to amend my motion to approve alternate 2 and ask that we focus on the sidewalk cuts and roundabout design.
Seconded.
Thank you.
Do we need to all vote?
What? Sorry.
All a vote.
Oh, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I'm tired too. Susan, where'd you go? I thought I saw her like
She's
bounce.
over here.
Oh, okay. She's back.
Like
Do we
to-
need a motion
Yeah, I'd
to-
like to move.
Oh,
to-
I would like to make a motion that Susan return.
Yeah, second.
Aye.
Teamwork makes the dream work, guys. Yeah. Aye.
Thank you, guys. You could have just let me sit.
No. Next speaker is Dale Price, and I just want to say he's been with us a really short time, but Sylvester and a lot of our staff were double booked tonight at 2 different meetings. So we're all here to support Dale.
There you go.
We
So we're
won't
going to
put you
talk
in the
about
hot
Atlantic
seat.
Avenue, and this is not Sylvester, but welcome.
They gave you the easy
He's
one,
already
didn't
got
they?
me. He's got me set up. Okay. Hello, I am Dale Price. I'm a new project manager with the City of Raleigh. Been here about 3 weeks. This is my 4th week, so please be kind. I am going to talk about the Atlantic Avenue widening project tonight, and This project, let me roll this down. The project location is on Atlantic Avenue between Highwoods and New Hope Church Road. That is going to be the footprint of this project. We are planning on, the purpose of the project is to improve safety and operations in the public right-of-way and provide pedestrian and bicycle connectivity throughout the project corridor via sidewalks and a multi-use path. The project elements are, we are going to maintain the current posted speed of 35 miles per hour. We're going to improve operational safety by implementing access control along the corridor through the use of raised medians. Add pedestrian and bicycle facilities. There is an existing sidewalk on the east side of the project, and we're going to add a 10-foot multi-use path on the west side. We are attempting to improve horizontal and vertical sight distances. There's some challenges there, and also some street lighting and landscaping. You're looking, this is looking north on Atlantic Avenue, so you have the existing sidewalk on the east side and a 10-foot multi-use path proposed for the west side, with a median, raised median in the median that also has some landscaping opportunity. We are going from 9-foot to 11-foot lanes at this point. 9 foot, it's a pretty tight road, and so we're going to widen it to 11. And this is going to be the typical intersection section to try to alleviate. There's been a high crash rates on this road, and we are going to try to alleviate some of that danger by preventing left turns out of that's specifically Ingram, and also have a raised median corral, if you will, for the left turn onto Ingram off of Atlantic, to try to alleviate and to calm traffic, and also to channel traffic in a more efficient and safe way. At this point, there is a railroad at Wolfpack right across from Highwoods, and there could be some preemption coordination at Highwoods and Wolfpack. We're not sure at this point. We're still in the early phases of that. So, our project milestones, we've already had a pre-design meeting and gathered public comment. In the fall of 2019, we'll be coming back to you with some more solid design at the 25%. So, any questions?
So one of the things to point out with this project is primarily right now, this section of Atlantic is a 4-lane undivided roadway for the most part. We're adding the median in. The median will provide the opportunity for us to be able to go in and add pedestrian crossings at multiple locations here. We did get some questions during the first public meeting about why we were doing the multi-use path on the west side as opposed to on the east side where a lot of the existing residential is. The fact of the matter is that once we go south of Highwoods, we're also considering a separate project for a multi-use path along the west side because it's the only place where we can get underneath the belt line on that side of the road easily, and that'll connect eventually all the way down to the Crabtree Greenway.
Right.
But the Atlantic Avenue corridor is a little bit special. It is a city-maintained street, so not NCDOT maintained.
My biggest concern with this road is the speed limit, because people are going way too fast. And I'm surprised to hear you say the lanes are 9, because if anything, I was going to say, can we make the lanes narrower? I guess I'm a little concerned about going to 11 based on our previous other conversations, because people are going very fast through here. And you mentioned Ingram. I know that's a very dangerous place. Yeah. People, the sight distancers or something, you know,
it's something.
You can be rear-ended at Ingram if you slow down too much to make a turn. So I think slowing traffic would be my biggest concern on this one.
Yeah, if this is a city facility, I'd recommend that we explore 10-foot lanes and street trees.
The project team, we're looking at some limitations on access at Ingram because of the crash history there and because what it would take to correct the vertical profile there would be really difficult. The good news is that by adding in that median space, we can add turn lane pockets in at locations along the corridor. We're also contemplating a traffic signal somewhere within the middle of the corridor, not just for traffic, but also to facilitate people crossing the street.
Okay. Yeah, well, like I say, that Ingram I know is very dangerous, and I feel like people are going way too fast.
I drive this road frequently. I think part of it is because people are going over the speed limit in a 9-foot lane, right? That's one of the reasons it feels so fast, right?
Yeah.
One of my favorite experiments, which people behind me hate, is to go actually the speed limit on a road and see how different it feels. And I travel this road a lot. So in some ways, I think the 9-foot lanes help with the speed. I mean, I think widening them is certainly not going to slow people down. I don't know if, I think a 10-foot lane would be worth exploration if that's something that the city permits and 35 mile an hour.
So you had mentioned, was this a city-owned facility, or, so street trees will be implemented, or they can't be due to site distance?
They can, certainly.
So they will?
Landscaping is part of
Yeah.
it, so.
Yeah, but you will run into situations where you're going to have some
difficulty,
some site distance.
But on the western side of the street, you should be able to get street trees.
Because if we also change the alignment to be 10 foot, couldn't we potentially think about, if we're going to be transitioning, I think we need to do like 10 foot is like what I'm leaning toward versus this. A 6 foot sidewalk is pretty tight, you know, for if you have more than one person walking on it.
Yeah.
So I think that there would be an opportunity, at least if we did re-scope that street to be a 10-foot right-of-way, to put that toward the multi-use path. Because I just feel 6 foot is too, it's just real narrow.
So one of the challenges with that, where we have the existing sidewalk along the east side of the street,
right,
there's a lot of heavy single-family home residential issues, and
Right.
so for us to go in and widen that puts a lot more impact into those yards.
Yeah.
So
But aren't you doing that with the road anyway? I mean, if you have to
It's
widen
actually
it.
symmetrical widening.
No.
Actually, this is going, the widening is occurring to the west.
Right.
Okay.
We're holding the curb and gutter that's existing in place along the east side of the street and doing all the widening on the west side.
And it's due to that fact that there's some constraints there with the single-family homes right there, the grading issues.
So you're maintaining that curb as a cost savings or for the entire corridor?
And minimizing the impact.
Yeah.
Correct.
I would say, I
Right.
think, you know, on this section as well as Carolina Pines, we're dealing with the lower income population, and to the extent that we can minimize property impacts, I think it's a good idea.
I hear that.
Gentler touch.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that the existing sidewalk is staying for the very purpose of, you're going to take all the widening everything's going to happen the other way. Okay, then that does make sense that maybe we don't want to impact.
Right.
You're gonna have some retaining walls.
It's all residential, and the west side
Right.
is all industrial.
Right.
And keep in mind too, that residential is mostly on cul-de-sacs, tight cul-de-sacs that come off of the
There's
street.
duplexes, they're
So
very
to-
parking constrained.
To widen that way,
Right.
you would be impacting those residents.
So one thing to point out, long-term, and this gets into our street cross-sections and right-of-way requirements, that if there was redevelopment, subdivision of those properties along the east side, they would then be required to widen out and add the wider standard sidewalk further set back from the curb as part of the subdivision process.
Okay. I also had a question along there because there are mailboxes right on the road, and I know that letter carriers get rear-ended on this road. I was just wondering, will the mailboxes just be put back out?
I haven't gotten that far yet.
It's
but
a good question.
25.
It's
That's a great question.
It's a great question because this is a
cluster box.
Yeah,
Imagine
cluster.
this would
We
not be a
probably
fun place
have to
to
look at
deliver.
cluster boxes on the cul-de-sacs maybe, or something like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
well.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't, that's a good concern.
Yeah,
I'll
it's
write it down.
when you want to talk about, visibility and the fact that there is mail delivery and stop vehicles with those up and down is
right.
also dangerous. So.
I do like the recommendation of the 10-foot lane, though. If this is already a fast travel corridor, I probably shouldn't. Let's look at 10 feet.
Would it be more appropriate to talk about design speed instead of dictating lane sections?
Well, I think that your
Both.
lane section is design speed to a certain
It's
extent.
part of it,
Right, so.
not all of it, for sure. What is the design speed, do we know?
Yeah, the
If it's 35 miles an hour, I would say.
posted speed.
The posted speed
Is the
35.
posted
The
speed,
design
I'd
would
probably
be
say
40 to 45.
40 to 45.
And with all those hills?
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna
why
say the
would we have a design
vertical
speed
is,
that's 10 over.
It's an old road. It's pretty straight. There's a couple of curves on it. But
I mean, I'm sorry, there's a lot of altitude changes. There's lots
yeah.
of-
yes, a lot of vertical difference.
We've already had some conversations, again, trying to minimize community impact. We are probably not going to be able to meet a 40-mile-per-hour design speed with all of those hills through that area. Again, this gets us into the realm of context sensitivity, where if we were to try and do that, we'd have to have massive impacts and recreate and.
Excavation costs would kill us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understood.
Okay, anything else?
Lower the better.
I'm curious about the preemption. The intersection at Atlantic and Wolfpack is already preempted. Is that correct?
What do you mean by preempted? Sorry.
Preempted is when the train signal sends a signal to their box and it takes over the local street signals. Is that a good way of putting it?
That's correct, yep.
It's so that people don't park on the tracks when they back up over it. Is traffic backing up Wolfpack Lane and getting on top of, getting up to, what was the, Highwoods? Highwoods, and what's the purpose of preempting the other intersection?
I don't know that our project touches that per se, does it?
No, oh, sorry.
Sorry, you mentioned on the railroad coordination.
Back.
Slide 7.
Trying, sorry. There we
There
go.
you go.
Hey, okay. That's looking on Wolfpack heading towards Atlantic.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
Hollywood's on the other side of Atlantic.
Right. It's Wolfpack on one side and Highwoods on the other.
Yeah, yeah. I don't have an answer
Okay.
for you at this point. This is a slide that the AECom, who is our consultant, provided, and he said, I don't know if this is,
Okay.
when I met with him the other day, he said, I don't know if this is, but I put this in just in case. I don't have an answer for you. at
So
this
yes,
point.
there is existing railroad preemption that would prevent right turns. There's a black box beside the traffic signal that
outside.
is illuminated during a railroad crossing closure.
Is the, outside of the project boundaries, the speed limit I know south of here is 45, and I believe does it go back up, or is that just north of there?
The speed limit
like it
remains
changes.
35, I believe, all the way into town from this
does?
point.
Okay.
North of here, once you get north of Pacific Drive,
Yeah.
it goes up to
Goes
45.
Up to 45.
And when you go south underneath the Beltline, the road widens considerably.
Yes.
So maybe it's not that the speed picks up, not the speed limit changes.
Right.
So you can feel it appreciably when you ride on this road, that this tight section, people do slow down a little bit.
Well, and I think people are
Before they go
trying to
50
fly down
miles.
Atlantic
That's
because
the
they don't want to,
shortcut.
well, because they don't want to ride on Capitol,
That's why. I
right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's, it's like,
Or
you
wait
can
for
go
it.
faster.
Or, yeah.
And I think
how
the
you get to Aldi
topography
from
probably
us.
leads into it, just like Wade, right? I mean, like the hilly leads to that type of, and you
Yeah,
can't
I
do
think
much
if you
about
drive
that.
it often enough, you can anticipate that there might be cars turning, and it's hairy, because if
Oh,
you're
yeah.
going the speed limit and you try to stop.
Right. So did you all mention that you were going to add one signal with this, or was that, did I?
Potentially, that's something that's being evaluated. This
Uh-huh.
is a traffic signal midway on the project.
Because there could be ways with the traffic signaling that would slow down traffic a bit and stage the traffic a bit, would it? I don't know. Do traffic signals slow down traffic as far as the corridor?
It
Sorry.
depends
I don't
on how
know.
they're timed with other
Right.
things, and, yeah.
So I don't know if there's a way to.
I did have one question about that Highwoods intersection, Wolfpack Highwoods. We currently have I think a sidewalk project along Highwoods to add a sidewalk, because there's no sidewalk there at all.
It doesn't
There
rank
is
high, but it's on
an
the
active
list.
conversation with the Highwoods Property Owners Association about a public-private partnership to add sidewalk between Atlantic and Capitol
And
Boulevard.
Capitol. So, and Atlantic, then it would connect to this new
Correct.
footprint. So that's important for connectivity.
And one thing that's not mentioned, there's a gap along Atlantic adjacent to this intersection that we'll be filling in as well.
Great.
Great, good.
Do you have an idea of what the intersection with an MUP and the side streets would look like? Would the MUP be with like curb style ramps like you're talking about? I was a little concerned to see they're not really slip lanes, but the turn lanes and the cordon, it looks like I'm afraid of high-speed turns from cars over the crosswalks. And so I was wondering what those crosswalks, if you had an idea what the MUP crosswalk would look like.
It would just be a conventional crosswalk. for something like this because all of those intersecting public streets would be at grade.
Okay.
So we might need to change the turn radius then to make it slow down speeds a bit.
So if we're using a 35 mile per hour speed, that allows us to use a smaller turn radius. That's correct. One of the challenges, you can see the larger boxes, and in this picture, north is to the right. So on the top side, which is the west side of the street, there are some industrial users in there. So one of the things we have to balance in that situation is how do you handle larger wheel-based vehicles, trucks?
Right.
So.
Okay, what else? We better get.
I guess I do have my final question. If we are going to be moving toward a mixed-use path as a new design standard for incorporation of a bicycle facility, I'm concerned about the maintenance of that facility, and because some of the greenways haven't stuck up very well over time. So how are we thinking if that's going to become our bicycle facility? How long will that facility last?
Evolving conversation. So
Yeah.
I think that as part of what's come out of the commission so far relative to that direction, you're seeing the first implementation and incorporation of those concepts into the design part of the process. We have not started the maintenance conversation yet.
But we have seen the maintenance needs as far as the greenway with this, unless have there been changes in the fabrication of that type of asphalt? Has the material product changed over time?
The thickness and the base has gotten larger.
Okay.
For more modern construction of multi-use paths. Yes.
Right. So maybe this would be an opportunity for us to look at once those facilities started being installed with our greenways. Was there a year, 2015, that they started doing that new standard for?
It was earlier than that, but there are some older ones out there, like for example along Falls and News Road and Rock Quarry Road that were done to an older standard.
Right, and they don't stand the test of time. I mean, they get real bumpy, and especially if they're tree roots, they pop right up. So that would be my concern with these facilities, that we need to be thinking about how we're maintaining them. And then this is a more pervious surface, right? So that is a positive because it allows some more rainwater.
It's considered impervious for all practical purposes.
It still is considered impervious?
Not the same thing as a pervious pavement.
Right. Okay. So that would be my concern. How is this going to stand up over time? Because once we have that bike facility, that's going to be the bike facility we got. We ain't going to get another one. So it's got to stand up. And the greenways.
I think that'd be an interesting question, that we could either talk about in committee or, kind of ask staff, because I know that they have formulas that they use for coming up with their annual maintenance, right? And so you know what it is for sidewalks, but now that we have more and more on-street multi-use paths, it'd be interesting to see what that looks like in a maintenance schedule.
And we're doing much more these days on sidewalk repair.
Yeah, that's great.
We've gotten a lot more aggressive about going out and seeking out those locations, and you can see spots where the minor milling can take place. That's been done, and where it's not. But there's, I think, about an 18-month backlog right now based on how much capacity we have in concrete crews to be able to get through and replace sections.
At least this would be asphalt, so a different crew.
Right. And it's a different process, too. You can shave down the concrete, but you can't do that with asphalt, can you?
You can.
A little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
Feather it out.
I'm good, then.
All right. Well, no, I think that is an excellent question of if we're going to be having asphalt multi-use paths in the right-of-way, what is the long-term maintenance impact of that?
Well,
Anything
I think
else?
the point that you raised earlier also about the need for markings is very valid in terms of communicating to users that it is a two-way bi-directional facility. That's something we can look at as we go forward.
Okay.
If I would ask you to, going forward, please give consideration to enhanced crosswalk facilities, because if it's not just a sidewalk, you're going to have some high-speed users. And would you mind flipping to the next slide down, and I can tell you what my discomfort is? So see that car there on the left-hand side? If you're that person walking straight up the sidewalk, that person in the car is looking over their left-hand shoulder, trying to merge into traffic, and you're standing there right next to their car, and they don't see you. And they'll sit there until they see a gap in traffic and stomp on the accelerator without ever looking to the right to see who's standing there on that sidewalk. Yeah. So angling the cars like that, or I'm not sure what the solution is. I ask you guys to
it's a different turning radius that's too smooth you need to create more of a 90-degree
Yeah, they can hit that one going pretty fast.
So that would be a
the crosswalk, it's the turn radius, it's
all of it.
Yeah.
Right.
I think you're right. That does encourage people to be doing this.
I run into it all the time trying to use the sidewalk on Six Forks.
There's one just up from that at the intersection of New Hope, where there's a slip lane. and they've put a stop in recently, and I stop at it, and the people behind me are like, "What are you doing?" Because it
Crazy woman.
reads as a free-flowing right, and that thing can kind of read as a free-flowing right as well. Not fun to drive by.
Is that what it is? Redesigned the pork chop
We'll
island.
look at a redesign of that pork chop island.
Okay.
And then
Or a
and the
stop sign.
And the accompanying radius. Well, there'll be a stop sign.
Right.
there for it.
Yeah.
There will be a stop bar controlling that vehicle movement.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Thanks for the opportunity to review these early.
Do we
Yeah,
need
this
to,
is
last
awesome.
time, I think we
Thank
made a
you.
motion and had a list. Do we need to do that again?
In this case, I believe we're only presenting you with one alternative. However, if there's other specific design changes that you want to.
Well, we mentioned the 10-foot lanes.
That's right.
Street trees at back of
And
curb.
street trees and,
Turning
Back of
radius.
curb.
and turning radius. Yeah.
Then yes, a motion would be appropriate.
All right. So would somebody like to make that motion for me?
Were we asking them to were we asking them to implement it or to investigate it?
Keep working and look into these things.
I would like to make a motion that you guys investigate looking into 10-foot lanes, into marking for the curb cuts. Is that what we said? Was that the other one?
Street trees at back of
Yep.
curb.
I'm sorry.
Street trees, back curb.
10-foot lanes, street trees at back of curb, and the turn radius and crosswalks.
Do I hear a second?
I'm sorry, before
Nope.
I finish my motion, and that we approve the design otherwise and think that it's great.
I'll second.
Mr. Neville, second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you so much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate the opportunity to weigh in early and often.
Thank you very
All
much.
right.
Thank you for your input.
It's getting to be late. Let's try to make short work of our next item, which is the fiscal year 2020 work plan development. But Eric, we do have to do this tonight. Is that true?
No, you don't, you can,
We're going to, it's supposed to go to council, isn't it?
you can send it to council after your June meeting if you wish. You have time.
Let's do that.
I was just going to say, I would really rather not rush it if we have some more time. I believe everyone has worked on it
We got working drafts and
Okay.
committees,
What
right?
we need from the staff's perspective is to be able to hand out a new updated draft work plan at your next meeting, or in advance of your next meeting. So we need to compile the feedback from the commission and the individual committees on what those components are going to
So
be.
if
5 minutes
each,
between
if
meetings.
each committee were to submit their suggestions, we could put that in a different color, perhaps, the changes, so that we could think about, that's why I was thinking we probably need to talk about them tonight, of what the subcommittees.
Yeah, we'll just have, in the next 2 weeks, the subcommittees are responsible for sending staff a modified work plan, right? That they worked on in subcommittee.
Okay.
We
So
can get it
that is, oh, Rebecca's left us. She's
Well,
chair.
I can speak on behalf of Rebecca because she did report tonight for the minutes that we have changed we have removed one item off the outreach committee item, and that's the only change.
Oh, right.
I happen to know that a couple of the other committees have already edited their documents, so we're probably not far from compiling a revised document.
Okay, well then let's take just 1 minute, 2 minutes to talk about the general commission initiatives.
That'd be great.
And that way we'll just do the committees we can do later. I don't want to keep anybody any longer. I know I'm hungry and tired and all those things too. But let's look at this list real quickly, because I think this is, if something needs to be crossed off, that's great. If something needs to be added, that's great. I think we talked about that continued coordination with Parks, Recreation, Greenway Advisory Board to promote Greenway for transportation and special events. And Mary and I had, as I mentioned, we had that meeting. We did talk about putting in our work plan that would be that the leadership of this group, the chair and vice chair at a minimum, would get together with the leadership of that group. So that would be making sure we add that in as a yearly meeting. I think some of the things that I was really interested in were the Greenway design guidelines, the Greenway master plan update, and then the neighborhood and community connections? Is that what TJ McCourt's working on? Do we need to get that in the work plan for anything?
The 5-minute park radius, park access. Yeah.
It's part of our to-do list to have TJ come and present the work that he's done so far in terms of park accessibility. Whether or not that needs to be an item on your work plan, I can't say at this point.
Okay.
But we do want to show you the work that Parks and Recreation has done on looking at trying to improve access to all of their parks facilities and the process that they've gone through.
Okay.
Isn't the existing item cover that in a more generic fashion? Those items would fall underneath coordination with Parks and Rec, right?
It could.
I guess what I'm really kind of looking for, maybe this belongs in pedestrian, but what I'm really looking for is for us to start more data mining of where sidewalks are missing. It just comes back to the Oxford Road comment of, whether the sidewalks are being generated as part of a community effort or a city effort. And I would really like to get a handle on where are our parks and our schools and our libraries and other public pedestrian generators that are not served by sidewalk. Or bicycles, quite frankly, either one. I would like to start getting a handle on that because I think right now we use the sidewalk
Petition process.
Well, no, I'm talking about the sidewalk prioritization, which is supposed to be going on, as well as the streetscape prioritization. And then you can petition for a sidewalk. Right. Well, my point is should we be looking at mechanisms for places that...
So if I could jump in, I think staff has a really good idea of where the sidewalks are and where the gaps are. And I think what the discussion that I see going on is about how to prioritize it, how to identify and fund those. And the city council currently has it in one of their working groups about how they want to handle the sidewalk petition program. And they're in the middle of updating that, if I'm not mistaken. So they'll make recommendations and probably have a policy change soon.
That's my understanding as well. And it occurs to me that we can, this third way, I think is important, that there's streets that aren't major streets but are major connectors that shouldn't just be beholden to the petition process. But we are fighting over a small amount of money, right? And so in some ways we're like changing orders, but the pot isn't growing substantially. So one thing I would be interested in doing is using that information as an advocacy tool, right? That there are this many parks that don't have any sidewalks anywhere nearby, so that in their annual budgeting considerations, City Council could consider allocating more money towards sidewalk construction. Because, we're talking about who's first and who's 25th in the line, but how many do we get through a year? I mean, y'all are working very, very hard, but if we had more money, we could do more.
But the methodology that TJ used in Parks and Recreation to evaluate parks could just as easily be applied to schools and to libraries as you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then find the projects that address the most and get the most bang for the buck.
Right.
I think the question is going to be, and then this gets into a policy conversation about how aggressive is the city going to be in going in and proactively retrofitting neighborhoods and whether or not the community would support that or not. And that's the obstacle we've run into in the past, and Oxford, I think, is a very good example of that. And that's why we've tried to move those into a petition framework to make those installations in locations where communities want us to be.
So does our work plan address that adequately through sidewalk prioritization? We just need to...
I don't think so. I mean, I think maybe we can have an item on our list that it's not that we're going to come up with a methodology. It sounds like council's doing that, but we should at least be tracking kind of more broadly sidewalk implementation, whether that's the petition process.
Don't you have something similar to that already in the
we may.
Well, and this would fall under the pedestrian planning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fall into that already.
Okay. Yeah, if we want to keep that in subcommittee, that's certainly fine.
Well, and I wasn't talking about just sidewalks. I was talking about bicycles and,
as well.
Okay. But I sort of feel like, when you have public facilities where you have a lot of people and possibly people, 30% of the population doesn't drive. And I think a lot of people are going to parks and libraries and schools that either choose not to drive or they don't. And so consequently, it seems to me that, the prioritization.
I think it makes sense to keep it as a unique bullet because, we do need to address the communal assets in our community and how all folks can access them. So I think that it makes sense to pull it out. I also wanted to add that final bullet is not reflecting like the true status of, it's talking about review and advise for the downtown planning process, which has already occurred now for that specific. It's also focusing on the creation of a downtown loop trail, which sounds like that was a specific deliverable folks were hoping to have achieved. I would almost say that we should focus on the implementation of the Tier 1 bicycle facilities that were proposed in the downtown plan. Because we do have a plan now that we can reference.
Well, interested in seeing the pedestrian component of that plan, which we've never seen.
So perhaps we could do a comma and say.
Well, I think that was my other question about the overall, is the integration with transit adequately addressed in our work plan?
It needs to very explicitly be pulled out because that is a mechanism for significant investments in our community right now. And that investment could come at the detriment of existing bicycle or pedestrian facilities if not implemented properly.
Right.
So
It can either be a good thing or a bad thing.
Right. So it's very important that we be preemptively thinking about integration with
Yeah,
that.
I don't think it occurred to us that we would be looking at modes competing against one another, right? Like our work plan doesn't anticipate having to protect facilities
Right.
in BRT implementation.
It's dog eat dog, girl.
Well,
All right,
unless
well,
you're a car.
We don't, unless you want to continue
Car
this
eat people.
conversation, it sounds like we need to keep a lot of time on our agenda next time. And everybody needs to be submitting their stuff.
Yes.
Me, to Eric, to who? What do we need to do?
Send it to Paul.
Paul.
Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, we got 2 are done.
Okay.
I think this is.
We're real close.
Yep. Outreach is only one removed and everything else stays the same, so that's
So
pretty easy.
let's convert this into a Google Doc and perhaps can we all, is that okay for us to edit this and send to you a final version of that? Or is that considered to like workshop-y?
I think
Public record
I
Google
think
Doc.
from a public record standpoint, we would probably prefer that you submit them by email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
But
we'll
you would
submit
get the
them
final-
separately to him,
Okay.
Paul, and then Paul will put them back out to us.
Could we, though, for the purposes of the collaboratively editing this document, do that in a Google Doc and then export that to you? Well, so many rules. Okay, I can't do that either?
Again, I think a few commissioners could do that behind the scenes.
Okay.
Yeah, each
That's
committee
not all
could
of
be
us
doing that.
together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Each committee can do that.
Okay.
That's correct.
And you need to find, okay, each committee perhaps.
And
I was
then
just trying
we-
to think for
we have to come here together
efficiency.
to really have the discussion
That's
about
right.
the full
And
thing.
send it to you.
So,
So
okay.
I heard the need for enhancing the inventory with parks, schools, and libraries in terms of bike and ped access, and then improving transit integration. Otherwise, regarding the bullets that are in the general category right now, are there any of those that we want to eliminate?
Well, that final bullet does need to be modified to reflect where we are with the implementation of the downtown plan. So I would say that it would be to review and provide guidance on implementation of the downtown plan in relation to bicycle and pedestrian facilities.
I think Molly took open streets with her when she left.
Oh,
Yep, I was going to
Rest in
suggest
peace.
that might, if we're no longer going to be pushing for open streets and it's not part of the outreach committee's items either, that we delete that item.
Well, I would wonder if we want to do that in case it does come up. If Molly comes before us, would we want to say it's not on our work plan to discuss this?
can we have something sufficiently vague that just covers like promotion and outreach of bicycle and pedestrian?
Well, I'm pushing just a little bit because in previous discussions about the work plan, the commission had talked about trying to pare down the number of bullets to try and create more focus. And at this point, we're adding.
No. I think we need to kind of prioritize them more than cut them. My concern would be if an open streets event starts to take place, we would not have the ability to, it wouldn't come before us and we wouldn't have any opportunity if we completely remove it from our work plan.
I mean, if a citizen came forward and asked for the support of the commission
can always amend it.
on that type of item, there's nothing that would prohibit you from doing that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, then that's fine. I mean, yeah, I just want to make sure it wouldn't become an item that we would regret not being able to talk about.
And just so you're aware, on the we are updating the bike-friendly city application this year. We're up for our 2019 renewal, and then we're looking into moving forward with Walk City designation.
Okay. Excellent.
Should we have, I know it doesn't really matter, the list of precedents, but our first initiative is the Triangle Bicycle Pedestrian Workshop, and we participate in that. How much coordination have we done in that historically?
We did a lot this, we did a lot this past year because it was held here in Raleigh.
Okay.
Well, that's a different one than this one. Isn't this the regional one that met in Apex or whatever this year?
Yeah, as staff, I know that I was involved quite a bit, but I think there were some other folks as well.
I wasn't that well. That's what you mean.
But that's the type of thing that you could remove it from this list that just continues to be an ongoing part of the mission of the
Or
commission.
just like more generic, like participate in local and regional events specific to bicycle and pedestrian.
Educational and advocacy events.
Right.
The second bullet, input on the comprehensive plan update, that's going to wrap up here. I don't know that you need to carry that forward as part of your FY20 work plan.
Didn't sound like they were coming back.
Yes. So I would be okay removing that one.
Yeah, me too. I have a question. This would be an ad, but because this is my first time working on this, tell me if this is outside of our wheelhouse. An advocacy role for funding in terms of seeking grants, advocating for bonds, seeking a larger share of the transportation pie from our council. Or is that not something? I mean, that's something that
We could make a
nonprofit
broad-
boards do, but I don't know if that is something that.
We can make an item, something to do with policy recommendations.
Yeah, I guess that would be a policy.
We discussed that actually specifically in the bicycle subcommittee today, just the review and how to figure out how to best advocate for like a dedicated fund, right. So like something to do with funding.
Yeah.
Perhaps should be.
I don't have a very good understanding of where we are in terms of, percentage of our resources dedicated to bike and ped enhancements relative to peer communities.
One of the things we discussed was putting a work item to study or to ask staff to make presentations so that we could understand that issue, like where the money's coming from and how it gets prioritized. And
We've had that
give
presentation
us more
in
of
the
it?
past,
Okay.
several years back, or I don't remember. I was going to say, isn't there a time, you've done that presentation for this board before. It might have been before some of these people were here, of
Yeah,
how much
I'm late
money.
to the game, so
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. I think it would be very timely.
Could
to-
be just for my
but
edification.
I think it's something that we can discuss offline, and maybe we can even like talk to Eric one-on-one and see if there's some way strategically that we can come up with a work plan item that allows us to look into those issues effectively.
Okay.
Bring
Well,
that back
here's
more
what I'd recommend. I'd recommend all the committees, how many of us allowed to talk together? 3, 2, 3?
As long as it's not a quorum, so that's no more than 4.
Okay, so the committees can certainly be working on this some more. And so I would really recommend, we're going to put this back in committee to think about the general as well as your own. And so that when we come back, we're going to send that all to Paul. But when we come back next month, we don't want to spend 3 hours on it. We want to really have it discussed in your smaller groups, and then we'll be ready.
Ideally, Paul brings us a draft to the old business section.
Yeah.
It will not be ideal, it's going to be required of us. So our next meeting of the commission is June 17th.
Correct.
And so I would ask that for the purpose of us compiling and having everything together, if we could have everything back from individual committees no later than June 10th.
All right.
Then we have a draft or a final draft that we
We'll
vote
have a
on.
clean draft out as part of the
on the
agenda package
17th.
prior to the meeting.
Right, thank you.
Okay, and when does it go to council? Does it go to council on the 18th?
So no, so you would take it to council
In-
on July 2nd. That's fine.
Okay. Anything else on work plans? I've lost my agenda. There it is. I've lost my agenda. It's time for board comments. I'm hoping they'll be brief. Does anyone have comments?
Everybody should go check out the Midtown Small Area Plan. They got like no less than like 3 or 4 pedestrian bridges recommended to bridge that whole area. So go check it out.
Cool. Excellent.
Options.
Options. We'll move on to announcements, upcoming events.
I think we covered most of them with the Bike Month activities. One that was missed was Oaks and Spokes is doing the Bike-In movie tomorrow night. So that's one of their Bike Month activities. And there is something interesting this Thursday night. Veterans with disabilities and those veterans injured have a nationwide thing called Valor Games. And there's 11 sports being held this week as part of the Valor Games competition. And one of them is cycling time trials. So if you want to see those very brave men and women out in various types of cycling equipment, it's Thursday at Crabtree Lake Park in Morrisville.
This Thursday?
It's this Thursday, the 23rd, starting at 8:30 in the morning.
8:30 in the morning. I was going to say, it'll be dark. That will be a challenge. Any other upcoming events? I'll confirm the next meeting is Monday, June 17th at 6 p.m. right here. And unless there's something else, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
It was a long one, but it was a good one.